Good evening. We are reconvening into open session from the City Council special meeting that started at 4:30. I'd like to ask the City Attorney to report out on item 2.
Happy to report out that the council has arrived at a settlement and has authorized settlement in the underlying litigation related to the Beechwood property, specifically the Half Moon Bay versus Great American Insurance Carriers lawsuit. The terms of that settlement agreement will be made public via a press release once the terms are finalized by the court, but we did want to report out that there is some conclusion to that.
Great, thanks so much. So now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
So moved.
For a second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Special meeting is adjourned. We're now going to convene the regular meeting of the City of Half Moon Bay for Tuesday, January 17th, 2017. Could I please have a roll call?
Councilmember Eisen.
Here.
Councilmember Kowalczyk.
Here.
Councilmember Rarback.
Here.
Vice Mayor Penrose.
Here.
Mayor Reddick.
Here. All rise for Pledge of Allegiance. New Year to everyone. This evening we have no proclamations and presentations, and I do have a couple of announcements of upcoming activities that I'd like to report on. Let's see, on Tuesday the 24th of this month at the Odd Fellows, there is going to be a program called America Now that's open to the general public. This will be a group exploration and a circle sort of process of what it means for each person who attends to be an American. And that's going to be at the Half Moon Bay Odd Fellows Hall, 526 Main Street, next to Cafe Society and upstairs. And that's going to be 7 to 9 p.m. on January 24th. On Thursday, January 26th, is the Half Moon Bay Chamber of Commerce Annual Recognition Dinner and Awards. That's going to be 5 to 8 p.m. at the Oceano Hotel and Spa Gatehouse, and reservations are required at 726-8380. On Saturday, February 4th, there's going to be the grand opening of the new multi-purpose facility that you see across the street next to Cunha School. That's going to be 4 to 6 p.m. at 530 Kelly Avenue. Admission is free. And the event is going to be co-managed by the Boys and Girls Club of the Coastside and the Cabrillo Unified School District. And that's all of the upcoming activities that I have to report. Does anybody have any additional? Okay, hearing none, I will ask City Council members if they have any activities to report.
Just wanted to report. So we did have a meeting of the Latino Advisory Council, and the group expressed deep appreciation for the city's efforts, the mayor's efforts, and staff's efforts around the Posada. That was really heartfelt, deeply appreciated, and wanted to make sure that that was expressed. In that same meeting, there was the Latino Advisory Council started a scholarship. Through those efforts, they've raised $1,000, so they were going to double it and have 2 scholarships for a high school graduating senior. And I made a donation of $100, and I challenged the rest of the city council to match me. And you can make a tax deductible donation to ALAS and put Latino scholarship in the memo, and ALAS will let you get the tax deductible write-off. That's my challenge to the council. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kowalczyk. Anyone else have a report out? Councilmember Rarback.
I went to the airport roundtable meeting, and those of you who complain about airport noise, be thankful you don't live in Pacifica or Brisbane, where some people couldn't sleep at night and their children were kept up by the constant airport noise. So we really have to work on better routing. The FAA was there, and we need to work with them to make some accommodations that work for everybody.
Thank you, Councilmember Rarbach. Anyone else? No? Okay. So
I attended a sewer authority mid-coast meeting with Mayor Ruddock.
So now we're moving on to city manager updates to council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of announcements. We're happy to report that is that time again to do network, engage, and transform. And so we are currently receiving applications and encourage the community to apply. I think we'll have a good time and get to know your staff and get to know some of your neighbors. Applications are available in City Hall or online. I also wanted to provide a brief update to the council on the storm that we had recently. I tried to keep the council informed as we were getting information, but I also just wanted to report out to the community. Staff did a very nice job of being prepared in advance. We knew the storm was coming. We worked very closely with Office of Emergency Services, with the Sheriff's Department, with our other partners in the area, regional and governmental partners, with SAM, so forth. And I think that we managed through the storm very well. There were a couple of trees down, there were a couple of things that we had to deal with, but thanks to our Public Works staff, we did a very nice job, and I just want to thank and acknowledge them for their work, including OES and our emergency staff here, emergency preparedness staff. Finally, we will have the meeting that was alluded to a moment ago, the community meeting on immigration tomorrow. That will be here in this facility, in this room at 6:30. We are inviting the entire community to come. We especially are interested in having the immigrant community join us. The meeting will be conducted in Spanish, and we will have translation for monolingual English speakers available through the headsets. We are interested in trying to provide information to the community of what is, what isn't, what we're working on. We want to hear from the community in terms of their questions and their concerns, and we'll try to answer as many of those questions tomorrow evening, and if not, we will document all of those and then circle back with that information. So just invite everybody to join us. Thank you.
I'd also like to say thank you to staff for the storm preparation. It was really excellent, and the communication was great, so thanks for that. Appreciate it. And thanks for your work on the NET program and tomorrow night's meeting. I know that a lot of hard work has been going into these programs, so appreciate it very much. We're moving on to public forum, and I have 3 speaker cards. I'll start with Jeff Corbett.
Good evening, thank you. Jeff Corbett, 366 Metzger Street, Half Moon Bay. Honorable City Council members, first of all, congratulations to those of you on your new appointment to the Half Moon Bay City Council. Last night I read in the Half Moon Bay Review magazine, the new council members look forward to opening a fresh chapter in city management, and in particular maintaining open space. This is timely because there have been many concerns across the community about traffic congestion on the coast. To the north of Highway 92, the traffic problem has reached levels where it seriously impacts our rural coastal lifestyle. To the south of 92, a similar situation is rapidly developing where traffic flow impacts our neighborhoods and lifestyle. Connected to this point, I would like to speak about the proposal for yet another hotel complex, this one at the intersection of Main Street and Highway 1. It is easy to list the detrimental effects of such a project: traffic gridlock, increased load on the city infrastructure, increased demand for water, gas, power, and sewer, strain on the police force, economic exposure and budgetary dependence, view corridor blockage, environmental impact on the bluff tops, infiltration of nearby neighborhoods, increased exposure to crime, reduced local property values, and general public eyesore. In October of 2016, a planning commission meeting was held to review the proposed hotel project. Several community members voiced their concern about the impacts, and others spoke with vested economic interest. Oddly enough, as the planning commission weighed the input, community concerns were soon dismissed as non-existent or inconsequential, and the conversation quickly turned to a discussion of building height, building color, facade design, entry door design, and the like. In short time, it appeared as though there was no negative impacts whatsoever. Rather, the real question revolved around whether a variance should be granted to add even more height to the structure. That was in October last year. Now we're in January of a new year with a new city council and hopefully a new outlook. Before considering plans for the proposed hotel, I would like to remind the council that in South Half Moon Bay, infill housing, the Ritz-Carlton, and the Moon Ridge project have already created large uptick in traffic loads. And yet we have yet to see the impact of Cameron's new hotel currently under construction. In view of this steady build-out, it might be prudent for the City Council to critically review the impacts of yet another hotel, a hotel approximately twice the size of the Best Western near Kelly, or twice the size of the new installation at Cameron's. It's big. Plus a conference center, bike rentals, car sale metropolis. So there's my time. I asked, does Half Moon Bay really need a convention center? And if so, at what expense? And I'll just skip down a little bit and say, please keep in mind a project of this size should not be based on who knows who, or who knows how to best manipulate the system. Rather, it should be based on the relative merits and demerits of the outcome of the local community. I think you'll find if you review it that the proposed hotel at the intersection of Main Street and Highway 1 really only benefits a few at the expense of many. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Corbett. Next speaker up is Sam Rashkin.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Sam Rashkin. I work as a government-trained economic development consultant, and I'm pretty sure as an economic development consultant, I'm Half Moon Bay's #1 fan. In my business, this mix of location, natural resources, including your open areas, and community values is a very rare mixture to find. On top of that, Half Moon Bay is already a branded city, meaning people know what it is and where it is, and that gives you a huge advantage. So why am I here? At least one council member has already figured out that I'm here tonight because I want to be part of Half Moon Bay. I want to be part of its future, and I'd like to work under contract as a consultant for Half Moon Bay. This small city has more potential than any coastal community that I'm aware of, and I go up and down the coast every month, back and forth for a living. This is the future. My background is in real estate and finance. That's my education. When I worked for the city of Monterey, I managed hundreds of millions of dollars of specialty and waterfront property and public assets. I have quite a bit of experience with the Coastal Commission and environmental groups. It's imperative to protect your environment, and it's a huge economic engine. Don't just give that away. And I also worked with low-income and housing issues. And as we discussed earlier, there's just not one type of homeless person, one type of low-income family. And the one thing I did learn working with a government agency is how easy it is to spend massive amounts of money and miss the target market, especially with low-income housing. And the other thing I learned was the Hispanic community was greatly underserved, even though they were 50% of our population, because it was harder for them. Most of the people, or many of the people who ended up in low-income housing were the ones smart enough to work through the system. In my private practice, I've been devoted 100% of my private practice to public-private projects. And by far, the most fascinating thing I've dealt with recently has been the new marijuana legislation. A quick summary of the cannabis business. There's 3 different categories. There's production, manufacturing, and sales. Production is growing, typically, from little plants to big ones. It's the least risky, and typically it provides the most economic development to a community. Manufacturing is edibles and concentrates mainly. It's the fastest growing business, and you're right over the hill from where a lot of that technology is being developed. And then there's sales. That's the delivery and the dispensaries. None of these are without community risk. There's pros and cons with each category. Whenever I get a new client, my first words are, it is federally illegal, folks. You're taking a big risk. On the other side, it's here and it can be managed. And in my professional opinion, medicinal cannabis has a lot of public benefit as opposed to some of the strong pharmaceutical medicines out there. So how can I help Half Moon Bay? My job is pretty straightforward. I do three things. One, I'm an analyst. I do research. My job is to provide you, the decision makers, with the best
I'll ask you to
information.
wrap it up.
All right,
Okay,
thank you
thanks.
very much. I'd like to speak with you further. I'll keep coming back until you're sick of me, I hope. But see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rashkin. Monica Ackerman.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for giving me a public forum. My name is Monica Ackerman. I'm a senior citizen. I live at Leslie Gardens. I've been there for almost 2 years. I love living in Half Moon Bay. I want to discuss the issue of Americans with Disabilities Act and compliance. It turns out that not all the public places in the city are accessible to the handicapped person. And I'm talking easily with people with a cane, not in a wheelchair, with a cane. And the one I found was Poplar Beach, which is the only beach that is owned by the city. All the other beaches up and down the coast are accessible, some more, some less. The State Beach is the only one that has an actual ramp from the parking lot into the sand. Some of the others, you park and you haul yourself in, but Poplar is completely inaccessible to anybody that doesn't have hiking skills. So when ADA was first passed in 1990, I was at Cal State Hayward taking classes in public administration. The first thing that came up in the discussion about ADA was that the only way to get compliance is to file a lawsuit. So the lawyers were happy with ADA. But the people that are trying to get access, for instance, somebody said, well, the beach is not accessible to you, you can go to another beach. What if the restaurant that I wanted to go and have dinner at didn't have access? Would it be okay to tell me just go to another restaurant? No, that's not what the Act says. The Act says public places have to be accessible to the public. So here's what I'm thinking. I know it's a big issue, and I'm thinking you should probably do what government does with an issue. Appoint a committee to study the issue. And I'm here to tell you I would be happy to work and serve on such a committee. Thank you all. And congratulations, new city council members.
Thank you, Monica. I have no further blue cards, so I would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar, except I need to pull item, let's see, where is it?
1C.
1C, the mayor's list of assignments. But we could entertain a motion to approve all the others. If somebody would like to read?
I move to approve the consent calendars, items 1A, 1B, 1D, 1E, and 1F.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I would now like to ask the council's indulgence to bring back 1C right now, as opposed to sending it to the end of the meeting, just so we can get it over with. I have just one minor amendment that I need to take care of. So we need a motion and a second to move it up.
I move, second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So item 1C, the only change I want to make see, I'm sorry, here we go, is the removal from the list of council liaisons of the Latino Advisory Council, because apparently that is a private group and not an organization that the council has a formal liaison relationship with. So I've been educated. So that would be the recommended amendment would be to drop the Latino Advisory Council.
I move to approve item 1C with the amendment.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So council, you have your assignments. We have no ordinances and public hearings this evening, so we're moving on to resolutions and staff reports. And the first item is 3A, and that's appointments to the Planning Commission and the Parks and Rec Committee. And I would ask the city attorney's indulgence to explain what is necessary to conduct this part of the meeting. I understand that you don't actually have to vote. I mean, somebody nominates, and then how do we proceed on this kind of an item?
My recollection is that an individual who is being given the opportunity to make an appointment names their individual who they'd like to appoint, and thereafter, with the consent of council, sort of reminds me ironically of the Senate's responsibility of advise and consent when we talked about Supreme Court justice. Ostensibly, the council will consent to the appointment, and that is done via a regular oral motion.
Okay. So now, my understanding is that all 5 council members may appoint or reappoint their folks. So I thought we would start with the new council members. Wait, I think actually we want to do the Planning Commission first. Would that be all right? Let's move on to 3A attachment. Attachment. Where's the Planning Commission here? I seem to be missing it. Page 40. Mine goes directly to the, let's see.
It's 3A attachment, yeah, right there.
Okay, I'm missing all the applications for the Planning Commission. Okay, for some reason, the packet I have is missing that, so I don't know why. All right, but we can proceed. So you're going to nominate to the Planning Commission. We'll start with Councilmember Eisen.
All right, I nominate Brian Holt. Brian Holt for the Planning Commission.
So we just say, all in favor, say aye? Is that all we have to do? Okay, all in favor, say aye. 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 Any opposed? None opposed. Your appointment is delivered. Councilmember Rarbach.
I nominate James Benjamin to the Planning Commission.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Your appointment is made. So we now have 2 new planning commissioners, Brian Holt and James Benjamin. And now we're going to move to Parks and Rec appointments. So I have a question here. So Brian Holt's on the Parks and Rec Commission. He's moving to the Planning Commission. I'm assuming you discussed that with him. So do I also get to appoint a Parks and Rec Committee person this evening from the list?
Just wanted to make sure that what the city manager just mentioned was before we move on to that we ought to at least reaffirm the remaining appointments on the Planning Commission for the existing city council members.
Good idea. So, Councilmember Kowalczyk, do you wish to reappoint Mr. Damon?
I do. So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And so, let's see, Councilmember Penrose. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries unanimously. So we have basically appointed the current planning commission.
You still have to do it.
No, that was the planning commission.
But you have to read.
Oh, I have to do Rick. Right, forgot. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Okay, so I would like to nominate Rick Hernandez to remain on the planning commission. All in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now we have a 5-member planning commission. Okay, so now we're moving on to the Parks and Rec Committee. And my question was, may I also appoint this evening? Or reappoint, or in my case, appoint, yes. Yeah. All right. So we're going to start again with Councilmember Eisen. Would you like to make a nomination?
I would, and I'd also like to say that the packet of information we got is phenomenal. There's a tremendous amount of qualified people for these positions. So in time, we hope to utilize your expertise on the council in different ways. But in the meantime, I nominate Amy Allhouse for Parks and Rec.
All in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. Councilmember Rarbach.
I nominate Elaine Roddy for Parks and Rec Committee.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And I would like to nominate Mr. Ramirez, Nick Ramirez, for the Parks and Rec Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And I'd like to ask Council Members Kowalczyk and Penrose to reaffirm or...
I'll reappoint Sherazad Pantera.
All in favor
Excuse
say
me.
aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Councilmember Kowalczyk.
I'll reappoint Steve Bassich.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So we also have a new Parks and Rec Committee. Okay. Now we're moving on to item 3B. And that is community workshops and materials on immigration rights and available legal services. We're considering a grant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you know, with the last budget, Council allocated some dollars for human services programming. We were charged with creating a program, criteria, application process, and so forth. Quite honestly, we just haven't been able to get to that project yet. And given the interest of the community recently that we have heard in terms of trying to provide more information, more services to the community regarding immigration rights, know your rights, that kind of thing. Staff is recommending that the council would allocate up to $25,000 of that money, that the city manager and myself would have some discretion over how that money should be spent, presumably, or not presumably, within the parameters of providing, again, know your rights workshops, helping people understand the criteria and the process for becoming a U.S. citizen, the criteria and the process for becoming a legal permanent resident, understanding what rights they might have with judicial warrants as compared to administrative warrants, and making sure that the community is well informed so that we can all feel that we are one community and we can continue to move forward. The idea would be to utilize as much as possible nonprofits so that there would be little or no costs, and to try to provide as much information to the community. We do a great deal of outreach to the community who would be impacted or who could benefit from this information, and just in an interest of trying to conserve some time so that we can move this quickly, we ask that the council provide the city manager with that authority within those parameters.
So are there any questions for staff? I have two speaker cards here, so I'll ask if you have questions first. Rick?
So I'd like to ask the city manager to comment on the approach, and so I like the outline and the suggested approach, but I'd like your comment on the approach from a use of public funds point of view, please. Thank you.
Asking about gift of public
sorry.
funds? Yes.
Yes, the idea would be to have the workshops be general audience workshops, so there would not be individual consultations. So none of the money would be used to help a specific individual with their individual application process. It would be providing the information to the entire group, or perhaps even providing information in terms of how the application process works and what kinds of documents are required, how to gather that documentation, what is needed in order to support the documentation. But it would be in a general sense, it would not be individual consultation.
Thank you.
Anyone else with questions? Would you like to hear from the public? Okay, Jim Brigham.
Dramatic. Hi, my name is Jim Brigham, council members, new council members. I just want to make my comment about the movement to grant funds to nonprofits to continue this effort. I want to start out in this sort of negative atmosphere we're in politically and so forth to say thank you. I really appreciate what you're doing in making that kind of move forward. I live now in Half Moon Bay, but for a long time I lived in Pescadero. I've been with Puente since the very beginning of its, I was on the first board when we first started there. So I have a long history working with that community, and most recently was part of some workshops where we did just this. And in response to, because pretty much Puente is sitting down there with no other resources and no other sources of information for people or where to go to. So we did organize workshops like this in which we had sheriff's department, attorneys, and a variety of people, and it worked. The main thing was that it allays fear. I mean, it's providing information. That's very extremely important to do. But mostly it allays fear because it connotes that you're not there alone. In this case, Puente, for example, was giving the message, well, you're not alone. If you begin to run into difficulties, we not only have information, but we will help you find your way through this. The other thing is that the most primary fear is not things like how do I become a citizen or how do I even get a green card. Most people know that. The biggest fear is what happens if someone else in my family is taken into custody and I'm not. So nonprofits that can help address that and help people organize themselves with plans. That was the biggest need we saw, was for people to be able to have some kind of plan as to what they would do. Just like if there's an earthquake and you have a plan, what happens with your family if there's an earthquake? Well, what happens if something occurs and that family member is taken away? So, but again, thank you very much for what you're doing.
Holly?
Honorable City Council members, and congratulations to our new members. Thank you also for your service. I'm very grateful. My name is Shirley Holly. I've lived in Alsace-Lorraine for about 13 years. I applaud the Council's effort to provide tools to the members of our community who may feel threatened by the new federal administration. I support one community. 30% of us are Latino. Some of us Latinos do not have brown skin. Some of us Latinos do not speak with an accent. Some of us do not have papers to confirm we are legal residents. Some of us who are legal residents have family members who are not legal residents. Some of us do not suffer from any kind of prejudice. We live together, we work together, we make Half Moon Bay thrive. We are one community. We are in need of muscular, on-the-ground legal service offered weekly at a reliable place. We have nothing like that now, except occasional workshops. We need education so that we know what information we are required to give the sheriff. We need to be able to contact an attorney by name if we feel threatened. We need legal counsel to understand our legal status. We understand there is much that we need that the city is not able to give us, but there is much that we need that it can. We appreciate the city's commitment to investigate what it is the city can do in a spirit of goodwill and commitment to human rights. As we all know, in a personal crisis, it is more helpful to explore what is possible than to begin with what cannot be done. In the face of a human rights crisis, I personally am not concerned with laws, regulations, or policies. I want to see us as a community and our representatives on the City Council offer our citizens respect and safety. I use the word citizen not in a legalistic way, but in a spirited, just, and practical way. This is a time to do the right thing, period. Thank you.
I have another speaker form, and that's Paul Grigoriev.
Good evening, council members. I just wanted to follow briefly upon the remarks of the first two speakers and hope that these sessions will also deal not just with the long-term process of trying to obtain citizenship, which as I understand it is almost impossible for the large number of immigrants who come from countries with very small allocations which are already exhausted. But we'll focus on the fears that some of our residents have regarding the operations of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Service, ICE, which the more one looks into it, the more one understands that this organization is known to make use of, frankly, illegal procedures to detain and then deport immigrants. I think it's very important that, for example, pocket cards are made available telling our neighbors what their rights are when they're confronted by an ICE agent, when they must or must not open their door to such a person, meaning the difference between an administrative and a judicial warrant. And I think it's also important to let them know the stance of the Sheriff's Department, which was quite forthright in setting forth how it intended or didn't intend to cooperate with ICE regarding ICE detainers, the documents that are used by ICE to try to get the sheriff who has an undocumented immigrant in custody to hold on to that person for long enough that ICE can come and detain and potentially deport them. So I think that's very important. And I would also second, I think, what Shirley said, that we need to try to move to making services available, legal, paralegal, and legal services available to these immigrants on an individual basis. I see no reason why we cannot spend public money in that regard. They need someone they can call, and they need good advice and counsel, since The vast number of immigrants who are detained by ICE receive no legal representation whatsoever, can be detained literally for years in ICE holding facilities, which are actually prisons, and have no right, or until recently, they've had no right to bail or bail hearings. And this can happen to children as young as 5 years of age. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was the last speaker. Bring it back to the council for additional questions to staff or comments. Do you want to make a motion?
I'll make a
Councilmember
motion.
Kowalczyk?
And then I'll make a motion. If there's more discussion, we can certainly have that. I move to authorize the city manager to utilize up to $25,000 for nonprofits to provide community workshops and materials on immigration rights and available legal services.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We're moving on to item 3C, and that is the planned Half Moon Bay project update.
Uh-oh. Okay. Sorry for the pause. Good evening, Mayor Reddick, members of the City Council. I'm Jill Ekus. I'm your planning manager, and I have been working with the community and your GPAC on the general plan and local coastal program update. And we're happy to be here tonight to continue an update from your November 15th session. Our agenda is briefly summed up here. For this presentation, we will follow the topics that were drafted out in your staff report, specifically work products and schedule milestones, topics related to the General Plan Advisory Committee, we refer to as GPAC, their membership and work plan in particular, land use topics, and next steps. First off, in brief, we would like to acknowledge the work products that have come out since April. These include a sea level rise vulnerability assessment, updated background documents, and most significantly, all of the first public draft policy documents for this project that includes the local coastal land use plan and all of the general plan elements. The last one was posted on December 1st. We've been working on a more detailed schedule, and we believe that we are approaching a transition point, which we will get to in a few slides from now, and we can revisit this in detail if you wish later in the presentation. We had presented it back in November, and I know we have new council members here, so if you have questions, let us know. Let's jump right into summing up where we are right now with our GPAC. Attachment 2 to your staff report includes GPAC membership since the group was formed. Currently, we have 1 vacancy and 1 alternate member vacancy. There are 12 members and 2 alternates, which is down from 13 members and 3 alternates. The GPAC formation documents specify a quorum to be 9. This has been going well. In fact, I think we had 13 at our session last week. Furthermore, the remaining members continue to achieve the key mission, which is to represent the community broadly. We presented this membership status to council on November 15th, and the item was continued to allow our new city council members to discuss along with you. Regarding the GPAC's work plan, we just would like to note that to date, they have met 15 times, And they are looking at 1 to 2 more sessions in the near term, including one next week, which I will plug now, Thursday, the 26th at 6:30 p.m. in the EOC, and we'll plug it again. We're going to hold on this slide for a minute. We have a bit to share with you from our observations from our most recent GPAC session, and we'd like to go through that a bit as it relates to the GPAC's membership and work plan. First off, we reread the GPAC mission statement, which is this statement here on the slide, and their principles of participation document. That's attachment 1 to your staff report. That document contemplated about 12 sessions over 2 years. No fault of the GPAC, this project is taking longer. And the GPAC is 3 years into their service, and they are going to have at least 16 sessions. We understand from past community input how important the GPAC is to this process, representing diversity in the community in particular. We have no intention of shutting that down. We are just noting tonight that we believe that the GPAC is approaching the conclusion of their primary effort. Here's what we see on the immediate horizon. At next week's session, we will try to complete review of the noise element, some remaining input on the circulation element, and also a final look at sea level rise policies that have already been presented. If we don't get through all of that, we are prepared to complete that with another session in February. At that point, we will have input from the GPAC and community on the local coastal land use plan and the general plan elements, which have been in the public forum for some time. There is a lot of input. We have not had a chance to consolidate these comments and prepare revisions and responses as appropriate. This will take at least a couple months. I have to tell you sincerely from staff, we need a pause from the feedback process to do that. This includes setting an end date for comments on these first public review documents and then taking a break from the public forums. So what we also noticed over the last few sessions now is the communities and the GPAC's input is really settling down. They've been able to make some critical consensus decisions where they have had some dissent, discussion, need for more development of ideas. Other areas, they have continued to provide input that is, we don't even request consensus because it is simply accepted by the group, as well as a number of community comments are treated that way as well. But we're starting to hear some reiteration of themes and various details, which to us suggests that the GPAC and community are approaching the limit to which they can provide input on these first drafts. Everyone needs to, we believe, move on to the next drafts so that the input can evolve along with the documents. We believe that the current work with the GPAC is on track with the Council's vision for this body, which is to provide consensus recommendations on policy direction. We also do not believe that the scope of this group intended for a word-for-word review of the document. That would certainly take a lot longer and involve much more effort than most of our GPAC members probably ever envisioned. And we would be concerned about that relative to the scope of this project and grant deadlines, and I'll note that in a little while. So based on this, we do recommend that keeping the GPAC's membership as it is, at least for the next couple of sessions, because they're completing this phase of review on these first public drafts. And then we are we're requesting your direction to help define what an appropriate transition would be, the timing and how to conduct that from the GPAC to the Planning Commission, which is what we believe was the original intent from those formation documents. We also had another topic, which was land use. And just to bring everyone up to speed, we're so happy to do this with our reseated council. A year ago, over a year ago now, we discussed the scope for land use within the Plan Half Moon Bay project. And council's direction at that time was to focus in the core area, and council also confirmed a core area boundary. And that was also an attachment to your staff report. So you've got a better looking version of this map in your report. At the November 15th session, we requested council's confirmation and clarification for a couple reasons. And specifically, we came to you then because a range of land use related topics have come up in drafting the local coastal land use plan and the general plan elements. The most significant, they're listed here, they're also cited in your staff report, and we're happy to discuss any of them in detail if you wish. So at the November 15th session, we reported this information, and we just sought council's confirmation on whether or not we were still within the bounds of your direction regarding land use discussions in the core area. So, hold on. So we confirmed at that meeting once again that this core area boundary was really to be applied as the boundary for where development would be focused, any new development in the city. And we mentioned some other changes that were on that previous slide, such as new land use designations that we've been discussing with the General Plan Advisory Committee, specifically one for parks and another one for open space for conservation, which in fact that second designation reached a consensus decision of the GPAC, I think it was back in November after quite a bit of a discussion. And the feedback we got from you in November was that that was okay. This is not about development. And so we're within the realm of direction. We also noted that there may be some policies associated with existing land use designations, such as those that are maybe more supportive of long-term retention of agricultural use, which was one of the top community input categories that we had. Also, we noted that in existing commercial and mixed-use areas, we were looking at healthcare facilities and if our zoning is too restrictive and being cautious about that because we had a lot of feedback about healthcare. Those are just a couple examples. Clarification also and updates about built-out PUDs. We already mentioned this to you, I think, in 2015 in the fall when we confirmed the core area boundary, that we had this situation where we have a 1992 document that talks about PUDs that at that time had not been built out, and quite a few of them are, and so bringing that language forward was quite awkward, and it was worth updating it. And I believe the input was that that was okay as well. But we want to make sure that we're within those bounds. We've been working comfortably. I think the GPAC has been all year, and over these last few sessions in particular, and anyway, we will look forward to your direction on that. And coming to the end here, so next steps. This slide shows the most recent GPAC sessions as well as the very next one next week on the 26th. So the very next thing we're going to do is see the GPAC again on Thursday and once and for all get to that noise element, which we've had to kick a few times because we had so many other things to talk about. And we're revisiting a topic in the circulation element and also the sea level rise topics. And as I already mentioned, we will stage another session if we need to complete those topics. Another next step relates to a highlight of this project, but it's also an obligation of this project. We've been fortunate to have secured $230,000 worth of planning grants. One of those is concluded. It was from the California Coastal Commission. It was their round 1 support grant for doing these kinds of updates. So we're very happy with that. We've been fully reimbursed. The second grant was awarded by the Ocean Protection Council, and it's specifically in support of planning for sea level rise. And that grant has been already extended for a year, which we were grateful for, and they acknowledged the extended community input process and a number of other things along the way that made sense to them why it was taking longer, in particular because we're doing a comprehensive update and not just addressing this one topic. But it does term out at the end of April, and we see that we may need to break that topic off to meet some of our milestones. It will be challenging regardless. It's just the nature of these grants. The third one is, I'm happy to say, literally in the signature phase for grant execution right now. It is the round 3 grant, similar to that first one I mentioned, from the California Coastal Commission. That grant was set up, that round was specifically acknowledging jurisdictions that are in a similar condition as us, in that they recognized you couldn't get it all done in round 1, and that it was absolutely fair and reasonable to expect a community to need more time to do a comprehensive update. So we were really grateful. They encouraged us to apply for that. And Council back in June passed a resolution in support of that application. It was granted in August. So what we see right now is what we'd like to do is to conclude this series of GPAC sessions, put an end date on a comment period for which has really been open-ended, and that's been intentional. We have not wanted to have predisposed an artificial end to this discussion. The discussion needs to take as long as it's kind of like it gets better when you have your stew the next day, you know. It seasons up. So that's really what we've needed to do, and we find that we're there, and so we need to conclude that and take the time to very diligently consolidate these comments, categorize them, prepare revisions to the document and responses to comments where we need to have a response, and come out with a revised document, which you may also see a breaking off of the sea level rise discussion if we need to for that grant. And then again, we're requesting some direction on how to plan an appropriate transition from the GPAC to the Planning Commission at the right point. And that is our report.
Thank you very much. A wonderful report. Thank you for all the hard work and forbearance through all of these meetings. It's really an extraordinary process. Thanks. So I actually have no speaker forms on this item. So now's the right time to ask additional clarifying questions of staff or comments. So let's start with questions and see if anybody has any.
Is the idea that the GPAC be dissolved? Is that part of what you're asking or recommending?
We're just, not necessarily. We're trying to understand how to keep the project moving according to the intention based on these formation documents, as well as this long work that they've done, their long service, and frankly the need. We do need to bring this to the Planning Commission. So what their role would be in that transition, checking in with them, for example, when we have the revised document, if there's a Passover, if there's a joint session, if there's a point in time later when we tap back into them. And of course, remembering that any GPAC member, whether they're still formed or not, could follow the process all the way through, the Planning Commission as well as your forum as well. So I guess I'm saying I don't know. We really want direction. Yeah.
Any other questions?
With regards to the sea level grant, we've already extended it a year, you said. It sounds like, and I'm trying to infer that it's going to be very hard to meet that deadline. I am wondering if it is worthwhile to seek another extension to that piece of legislation, or to focus on it maybe possibly as a higher priority earlier on, and just wanted to ask that question and seek your feedback on that. Obviously, we've asked for it before, I get it, and so it's hard to ask again, but the funds have been allocated. We are a community in need of working on that piece. So I'm just curious to your thoughts.
My response would be, I imagine that we may end up doing a bit of both of those things. Trying to bring it forward, demonstrating that we are making our best effort to meet those milestones, and at the same time possibly having to ask again for a bit more time to accomplish it. I wouldn't be surprised if that's how it comes through. Yeah.
Anybody else? Well, Rick, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Go ahead, Harvey.
Thank you very much, Jill and John, for all the good work you've done. I've been to every GPAC meeting and most of the Planning Commission meetings. And based on my experience and what I know about the difficulty of getting the general plan elements through ultimately the Coastal Commission, I think the way forward is to separate the local coastal program from the general plan elements, and to start working very hard on getting through with a local coastal program. The city attorney told me that the way you're supposed to make discussions is to always start with a motion, and then based on that you can have a sensible discussion. So I wrote down what I propose. It's a two-part, somewhat long motion, but I think I would like to present it and see what the council has to offer and in terms of direction to staff. So I move that we direct staff to, 1, prioritize completion of the local coastal program over the general plan elements, and bring the draft local coastal program to the Planning Commission with track changes. You know, track changes, that keeps a way of finding out the differences, as soon as possible for commission review and consideration, along with the existing LCP, portions of the 2005 draft LCP amendments as appropriate, and the Malibu, they have a good LCP for reference. The goal is not to rewrite the current LCP, but to create a better, clearer, consistent document than the present LCP that may satisfy both the community and the Coastal Commission. The Commission, this is the Planning Commission, should meet sufficiently frequently to keep the LCP update on a fast track. It might mean that they have to meet more frequently than they've been doing and have dedicated agendas that are involved in just doing the LCP. The second part of the motion I'm proposing is to continue the meetings of the GPAC until outstanding general plan element issues, including circulation, noise, and sea level rise, are addressed to the satisfaction of the GPAC and staff, and the GPAC is ready to make a recommendation to the Planning Commission. That's pretty much what Jill had in mind. The Commission will continue to prioritize the LCP over the general plan elements until the City Council and Commission are sufficiently satisfied with the document to adapt and forward to the Coastal Commission. So that's where the direction I think we can make the most progress in the least amount of time. I apologize for reading it, but it's complicated enough, and I had enough ideas. I wanted to make sure that it's, in black and white for discussion.
Does anyone wish to make a second for purposes of discussion? Then I will make a second so that we can have a discussion of both pieces of the motion. Okay.
Mayor? So, comments. With all due respect, it's a little complicated, hard to track, and reference all the points of reference. But my question is to staff. The main concept I understood was separating the local coastal program from the overall plan. Is that typical? Is that typical? Is that a way to fast track? And my overall question is, why change now? And maybe that question goes to Harvey, but the first two questions go to staff.
So we were quickly talking about this. So I'd like a little more time to think about it, but the bottom line is we can certainly bring and focus on the LCP first with, as I heard, with the Planning Commission, and we'd be very comfortable doing that with a track changes document. I'm not clear about all the other details in the motion, such as that 2005 amendment or the feedback on not amending the whole document as opposed to, which is frankly what we've already done in this draft. So we need some clarity about that. But so we could do that first and then bring the elements next. Remembering, however, that they have to, because this is a comprehensive update and the way that it was approached, everything is, there's overlaps and we're checking consistency as we go, and that needs to continue. And we have to do CEQA. And so our environmental review, our environmental impact report will need to be covering all of it. It's okay to do one before the other. It's just we are going to then have to get the elements done so we can complete that process as well. I think that doing that kind of work with the LCP would give us a chance to have more dialogue with the Coastal Commission staff. And there's a lot of good points to it. I haven't had much time to let that sink in. Okay.
Through the mayor. So
okay.
if the current approach is it's a combined, integrated effort, and all of the components tied together, tick and tie, and they're all coordinated, I would be concerned about changing the path we're on if there's no or minimal value to that change. So I would need some input from staff or council on how that affects the process, because I don't want to slow the process, nor do I want to create error in an integrated document by separating it from an integrated piece. But I see City Attorney is anxious to speak.
Anxious not to speak, but what I would say, just having heard this idea for the first time this evening, is that we have to recall that the general plan, and this is, I'm just quoting my professors from law school here, the general plan is the constitution of land use for the city. So the LCP, anything underneath it, the zoning ordinances, has to be consistent with the general plan. So if you start engineering something further downstream, you have to be mindful that you may have to go back to the general plan to make revisions to make it consistent with the LCP, which is sort of backwards in how the process is set out within the government code. I don't know that it's unmanageable. I was kind of looking over, hoping to confirm with John how that would be worked from the staff perspective, but from the legal side, you do create a little bit more, I think, difficulty in making sure that those two documents, the general plan and the LUP, LCP, are going to be cohesive throughout. You can't have one piece in the LCP inconsistent with the general plan and vice versa.
So if I can conclude my comments. So based on that, I think it's wise to keep them combined. And based on that, my opinion is that I don't want to design a sub-document and have that dictate the umbrella document. I want to do it comprehensively. So I'm going to, I think it's a good idea and well thought out, and I like that you're really examining these things. In this case, I'm not going to support that, and I'm going to want to keep it combined and conclude the process that we're already on.
Thank you. Councilmember Eisen?
Yeah, so Harvey, what are the advantages as far as you're concerned for going the way that you proposed it? Because I understand what you are asking for. I don't quite understand, as Rick was just talking about, what your perceived advantages are.
The general plan elements can get easily tied up in litigation. In some cases, some general plan updates have taken 10 years to get certified. The LCP doesn't require the level of CEQA that the general plan elements do. So it's something that we can go forward with. We can make a coherent document. The Planning Commission can work with staff to produce a sensible LCP that can get sent up for certification way before the general plan elements might be ready for certification. So it's a way to fast track the whole land use issues that are involved in the city. And I'm not saying that the general plan elements should not be discussed and that the GPAC should not finish with the last of the elements. I'm just saying that we need to prioritize. We need to spend our efforts working on the LCP, and I just see a way forward by doing that.
So I actually support Harvey on prioritizing the LCP. And first of all, the LCP isn't subject to CEQA. That can go on to the Coastal Commission without CEQA. Again, with Harvey, we don't have to stop work on the elements, but I think we really want to get moving and get a document approved. We want to get it through the Planning Commission and City Council and up to the Commission, and we want it to be a document that the Commission, can approve. So we have a current document that was approved, and we certainly, can make it better and clearer and, more consistent, with the application of policies. And we don't have to tie it unnecessarily to the general plan elements. I think, I'm not terribly familiar with the 2005 document. I think Harvey brought it up mainly as a reference. And I'm guessing the Malibu LCP was referenced because it's something that took a lot of years. It was written by the Coastal Commission itself, so you have some assurance that there are policies in there that they like. We can compare it to our, existing document. The important documents are the existing one and the track changes that we have from the GPAC. And certainly I think, members of the public and the GPAC should continue to supply comments to the Planning Commission as they're reviewing the document. I wouldn't stop anybody from supplying their comments or anything like that. But I think we want to move it along. So I certainly support separating out the LCP and the general plan elements, getting it to the Coastal Commission, and then having the GPAC continue as needed. And certainly there may be a period where you have to incorporate all their commentary. There might be a hiatus, but then reconvening them. So we're not sending them away by any means. I think you brought up a good list of issues that ought to be, that still need to be addressed that the Planning Commission should look at. I have a couple additional I'd like to add to that list. Certainly, I think we want to have them, revisit and clarify the planned unit development zoning. I think we need to look at something that's consistent across all the PUDs, whether they're currently built or not. I think they should have specific plans, and I think they ought to be certified by the commission. That's just my opinion, but I'd like the Planning Commission to review PUDs. I don't think the habitat maps go far enough. I think we need to take a look at those. They don't, as far as I can understand it from looking at them, they don't include any current wetland delineations or habitat mapping that's occurred with projects that have been approved or what have you. So let's look at the habitat maps. I think we need to update water and sewer capacities, priorities, and allocations. We're going to be looking at affordable housing. I think I've seen different documents cite different, remaining connections. I'd like us to clarify what exactly we have, what's priority, what's not. Do we want to change some of those classifications, right? Again, affordable housing. I think we want to look at level of service versus VMT. I don't know exactly where staff's going with that right now, but take a look at that. Downtown density and preservation balance. A lot of people want downtown preserved as is, somewhat more density. So maybe looking at the downtown issue, that balance. I think we have to look at what's habitat, what's a buffer zone, what's allowed, what's not. Let's see. I don't know how far it extends in a discussion of recycled water or sea level rise, but certainly look at those. And because of the Coastal Commission action relative to Beechwood on the lot retirement issue, I don't know if that's a policy that the Planning Commission needs to address, but certainly I'm throwing it out there. We have some money for lot retirement through Beechwood that we haven't dealt with yet. We need to bring that back. That's an obligation that we haven't met so far. So those are just some of the things, in addition to Jill's wonderful list, that I think the Planning Commission should look at during their process. But I'm going to support Harvey's motion. I don't know if there are tweaks other folks want to make, but
is there a way to get an understanding, and maybe we don't come away with voting on this directly tonight, but come away with a way to have a recommendation from staff moving forward, but of an understanding of how much course shift, back to what Rick was kind of talking about, how much time allocation possibly this would affect in terms of the progress moving forward? Like, is this a schism in the progress that's been made and now we move backwards slightly? Or would it be possible to just move forward as suggested without tremendous disruption?
If I may, the mayor, the way so the council could give direction to staff to consider the suggestions and bring back an opinion, and I would support doing that over pushing it forward tonight. Because I think for me to vote for it, I would need to consider it more fully, and I'm open to doing that, but I don't have a big enough understanding tonight. And my biggest question is around if they're not aligned, which governs, the LCP or the general plan? And that's the risk. I don't want them to be not aligned. So I need to understand that. So I would support direction to staff, tabling the item, and I'd move to table the item and suggest we give, that's a motion, and then my suggestion is to give direction to staff to consider this change and bring back a recommendation.
I'm not going to support a motion to table. I might support a motion to continue to the next regular meeting, but not to table, because I don't want it to disappear.
So in my mind, it's the same thing, so I'm fine with that.
So, but let's ask the maker of the motion how he feels about this.
I think it's clear that we can get the most progress if we separate the LCP and get the Planning Commission to work on it. So that's why I put this idea together. I think it makes the most sense, and I hope at least the majority of the council can support it, because I think it makes a fast track. It won't slow things down. It'll make a fast track, And by not making a complete rewrite of the LCP, but just start with track changes, we can get the Planning Commission on board as quickly as possible.
Councilmember Penrose, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I just want to say that there is no rush to get any of this done. If it takes 3.5 years as opposed to 3 years, that's fine. So if we have to push our schedule back by a couple of months in order to accomplish this, I'm for it.
Well, we have a motion and a second, and I'm going to ask for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Eisen?
That's a good question. The question is whether or not I approve the motion. Reed, you want to say anything before I do it? Please.
I really do hate to interject myself as council comes to a decision, but the question that I have is, what is the motion before this council? I know that Mr. Rohrbeck read a very detailed motion into the record. I know that the mayor had seconded that motion, but had also listed a number of items that the mayor felt should be considered in addition. I don't know if the Councilmember Rohrbeck had a chance to accept that as a friendly amendment, or whether, and again, we're getting a bit into the rules of order as I explained to you prior to starting this new season, but if we could get some clarity on that so that at least when the council members are voting, we have at least staff understanding and full council understanding of the motion, because it was, I think Councilmember Rohrbeck admitted, it was a wordy motion, but it was a detailed motion which was worthy of that wordiness, and I see another hand going up by staff. More important, they understand it than me, quite frankly.
Harvey, could you boil down the two parts of your motion into two actions? Distill it into the two actions.
Through the mayor, can I ask, there's a staff comment, can we maybe hear that before the motion clarification?
Thank you. I think the greatest clarification issue we have, we can proceed in however manner the council directs us to do so. And certainly we believe there's merits on both sides of the issue. I think most importantly in clarification of this is that we have gone in and done a major update and revision and have comments on the LCP, LUP component to this. As I understand the motion, it would be to go back to our current 93 version and modify that and do the track changes and modify from that point. If that's not, if staff's unclear, that's where we're a little concerned, because we don't really want to throw out the work and the commentary and the revisions that were made to that point. And we did do a significant track change and also adjustment to that. So that's probably the greatest clarification on this. So that's part of it.
So I think what he's getting at is that we want to be able to see what the changes are, that the GPAC and staff, have made together on the LUP, so that it's clear to the Planning Commission, what the current one, the current certified one says, and what the changes would do to it, so that they can understand the changes. That's all, I think.
And we followed through with that as part of the GPAC response on the policies. Again, the issue and concern that we have is if you're taking every paragraph and doing that, that's an unbelievable task and will take an unbelievable amount of time. So it becomes the question of, is it the policy side of this that we're most concerned about, or is it every nuance, every paragraph, every word, doing that compare? Because we're working from a 93 document that we don't have a Word version of, for example, with that, and you can't do an easy compare. So those are just, and I will say this is that it might be appropriate to step back, come back February 7th, so we can clarify exactly what we're talking about be able to provide some response to that. But again, I think that, you can provide us direction to go do that, but at some point we need to come back and tell you sort of how we proceed from here. And I think would be preferable to us trying to figure out what was the intent overall with that.
This motion actually lists some references that would make it easier, not harder, to produce this document and work with the Planning Commission and staff together. If they use as reference the 2005 unaccepted but written down LUP update, the Malibu local coastal program, which was accepted and essentially written by the Coastal Commission. So you have a good starting point from which to produce this document. And I think it would not be an inordinately long task. As a matter of fact, that's why I'm proposing it. I think it's the way forward that would facilitate producing the document as quickly as possible.
Madam Mayor, if I may, this is a policy decision, and we are happy to take a policy decision, but I'd like to understand what's being proposed. I can't follow that motion. I simply cannot follow all the level of detail. So if there's a way to break down the motion, there's lots of detail. I'm concerned that that there's a level of expectation that, and perhaps we can, I just don't know if we can meet those expectations. I just don't know. It was too long for me to follow.
Again, I apologize. I just wanted to get it in black and white, to clarify my thoughts. But if I had to break it down, the gist of the motion is to prioritize the LCP update over the general plan elements, have the Planning Commission work with staff to produce an updated LCP that shows exactly what the changes have been from the 93 LCP. That's the gist of this motion.
So perhaps if you could entertain the idea of making a different motion, because I can't track what other details were in your first motion. I just can't track. You've got it in black and white in front of you, but I don't. And then I also just want to understand, would you be open to the idea of making sure that we can track the changes, not necessarily using track changes, but track the changes? In other words, are you married to that idea, or is it that you'd like to make sure that you understand and the community understands what the differences are? Because I think that's a different task than specifically using the word track changes.
I'd like to jump in here. So, to answer your question, probably the most important things are the policies. Just how they, what are the proposed changes? Do they work? Do they make it better? Do they clarify? Do they make things more consistent? But then we have those lists of issues. We have your list of issues that still need to be kind of looked at more closely. And then I just, raised another series of issues that we want the Planning Commission to look at as well. So I think, as Harvey mentioned, we don't want somebody to rewrite it, but we want to, get some level of oversight by the Planning Commission. Are we getting a better, clearer, more consistent document, looking at the policies, potentially having reference documents? I don't know about the 2005s. I don't know what it is. But and working with staff to just understand what are the changes that are proposed by the GPAC and what does it do to our current plan. But to get it to the Planning Commission so we can start that discussion. Not preclude anybody from submitting additional comments, showing up and giving testimony, but to get that part of it rolling. And then I think the other part of your motion was continue the GPAC as needed, would be my, I don't know if that works for you, Harvey, but.
It works for me.
Councilmember Kowalczyk?
How long has the GPAC been assembled? 3 years? How many meetings have they had? 15? And their recommended go-forward approach is to move forward with the general plan with LCP as part of that? Is that correct? That is the process, that is the path we are on as of right now.
that is the path we are on. That it was not their choice or direction to do so. That is council's policy and direction on the path.
And so what I need to understand is any value to changing that. I see risk. I see separating a combined document that needs to be integrated. That creates risk. I haven't heard, other than saying it's faster, I haven't heard confirmation that it's faster, and I've also heard resistance to allowing staff to take this back, think about it, come back with a recommendation, say, yeah, that's no problem, it makes sense. So I can't support that. I'm happy to let staff look at it and say, give us their opinion on it. I think that makes logical sense. But because you see it's a great idea, doesn't demonstrate to me that it's a great idea. And unlinking a document that is linked doesn't sound like a great idea on the surface, and changing the process that we're on seems, I know it's not a whim, but it feels a little bit quick after 3 years of work, a path we're on, 15 meetings, 12 members. I support that path.
So let me just give you an example of why it's not good to necessarily keep things linked. And what you need to do is look at the county's local coastal program update. So they did not forward on the LCP. They kept them all linked, the general plan elements, the LCP, and it took 13 years. So, the LCP is basically the driving document in terms of policy. That should basically be setting a tone for everything else. So I don't want to do what the county did. I want to deliver an LCP update, before I'm out of this city council. So I don't want to wait another 13 years. I'll be way too old. So what I would like to do, since I have a motion and a second, would, for the purposes and benefit of staff, I'd like Harvey to restate items 1 and 2, and then I'd like restate the second, and then I'd like us to vote.
You want me to read this formal statement again, or
No, I'm asking you to boil it down as the city manager requested.
All right, I'll be glad to. Okay. I move that we direct staff to, number 1, prioritize the update of the LCP over the general plan elements, and get it to the Planning Commission to work with staff on producing an LCP update in a timely fashion. The second part of the motion is to continue the GPAC working on the remaining elements that are circulation, noise, and sea level rise, but with the understanding that the general plan elements are secondary to getting the LCP update to the Planning Commission and certified by the Coastal Commission as soon as reasonably possible.
Somewhat clear? No, that's better.
I move that we continue the item to the next scheduled meeting.
Yeah. Well, he already had a motion and a second on the table. I was asking him to clarify his motion.
Still make a motion.
You can still make a motion, but we're going to vote on this motion first.
Wait.
Can I just intercede? We didn't hear circulation element or the healthy communities element in the list of the general plan elements to continue.
Noise, circulation, and sea level rise. That's okay. Those were on my slide.
Yeah, but there's the other elements of the general plan to continue.
Sea level rise,
The
healthy communities.
All right.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify for the motion purposes that we'll continue to proceed with all the elements of the general plan. Is that
Correct.
okay? That's the clarification I was asking for.
So to the city attorney, so we had a motion and a second on the table, and now Councilmember Kowalczyk has made a motion. What's the order here? We don't have a second to his motion, but.
I hope everyone's been studying Rosenberg's Rules of Order. My favorite part. It'd always be nice if the council could vote to suspend the rules and do whatever it likes. Remember, that option is always on the table. But according to rules of order as adopted by the council, the motion was made, there's a second. There's a competing motion that was laid on the table before a vote on the first. You should explore whether there is a second for that competing motion, and then if there is, and there is a question or a call to roll to vote, to take them in the order they were presented. So it would be Councilmember Rarbach's motion heard preliminarily, and then Councilmember Kowalczyk's motion heard second, if it has a second. But you should seek clarification on that before it expires.
So is there a second to Councilmember Kowalczyk's motion to continue?
I second it.
Okay, so we're going to move to Councilmember Rarbach's motion to proceed. We have a motion and a second. Could I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Eisen?
Although, can I talk about what I think about it before I say anything? I very much agree with what you're going for. I need to understand it a little bit more myself, and I want to make sure that we are all clear as to the timeline required and the workload required before we do it. We've waited 3 years already. I think 2 more weeks we can handle that to make sure we're all aligned, so I vote nay.
Councilmember Kowalczyk?
No.
Vice Mayor Penrose?
Yes.
Councilmember Rarbach?
Yes.
Mayor Reddick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We need to vote on the motion to continue, the motion and second to continue. Is that correct?
When the result of the first motion extinguishes the second, there's no need to vote on it.
The motion, Councilmember Rarbach's motion has passed on a 3-2 vote. So staff has their direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brief.
I have a brief comment to make. I would hope that as we go forward over the course of the next 2-4 years, that we are patient as a council to hear from all members. I think it did no harm whatsoever and would have led to a 5-0 vote and shown our community support had we simply continued the item. But now we have the split vote, and you got your way, but you could have done a better job, and that's my opinion. Thank you.
And thanks for sharing it. So I'd like us to take a 5-minute break, if you don't mind, for restrooms. Thank you. We're moving back to our meeting here and our agenda. We're on to item 3D, our solid waste request for proposals. Take it away.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. I'm Jennifer Chong. I'm the Management Analyst in the Community Development Department. I have Richard Tagore-Urin with me here. He is from R3 Consulting, and that's our solid waste consulting services. Thank you so much for having us back tonight to present the draft solid waste request for proposals. Our presentation tonight consists of 4 parts. It's broken down as an overview of the timeline for the procurement process. We have a quick refresher course on what is solid waste and why it matters. We have then an overview of the current services that the City of Half Moon Bay is currently receiving, and then what staff in R3 are recommending in the RFP. And then we're going to close with an overview of the RFP and what else we have left. Okay. So how did we get here? Oh, and I apologize that you can't see that slide as well up on the screen, but hopefully you have your PowerPoints in front of you. But so how did we get here? The City of Half Moon Bay entered into a 10-year agreement with BFI, now known as Allied Waste Services, in 2002. This agreement was extended for an additional 5 years in 2011. In December of 2015, City Council opted for open solicitation of the new franchise agreement, and they instructed staff to begin preparing the RFP and negotiate a 1-year extension with Allied. The 1-year extension was approved by City Council on July 19th, 2016, along with a professional services agreement with R3 Consulting to help staff through this process. Starting in October, staff in R3 began outreach efforts to solicit community and City Council feedback on the current services the City of Half Moon Bay is receiving, in addition to potential services that they would like to see in the upcoming franchise agreement. These outreach methods included an online survey, which was available in printed format and online, and a community meeting, a study session for City Council, and a meeting with the City Council Finance Subcommittee. Based on the feedback gathered from these outreach methods, staff in R3 has prepared the RFP that is being presented to you tonight. Upon approval from the City Council and barring any major changes, staff will finalize the RFP and release it by January 31st, 2017. Based on this current timeline, proposals will be due April 4th, 2017, and excuse me, I should have changed slides here, but I couldn't see it. Okay. So based on the current timeline that's now on the screen, staff will release RFP by January 31st, 2017. Based on the current timeline, proposals will be due by April 4th, 2017, and upon receipt of the proposals, staff will evaluate them and bring back the results to City Council by June 20th, 2017. With City Council approval, staff will then begin negotiations with the top proposer or top proposers, and we will bring back a draft franchise agreement for City Council approval on July 18th, 2017. The remainder of the year will be dedicated to the hauler transition with new services, and we hope that the new services will start January 1st, 2018. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the rest of the presentation to our consultant, and yeah, if you have any questions, let us know.
And again, thank you and good evening. I'm Richard Tagore-Irwin with R3 Consulting Group, and we always like to start our little presentation just with a simple statement that as a consultant, we are independent. We only work for public agencies. We do not work for any private solid waste service providers, landfill operators, or facility developers at all. We only work for public agencies. Just wanted to have a little bit of a background of what we're talking about here. And we're talking about how your city manages its solid waste, and it is a lot of state requirements of services that you have to have provided either directly through municipal or through contract services through a franchised hauler. It used to just be trash. It's no longer trash. It's recyclables, a number one item of how you handle your recyclables, collect it, process it, have it marketed, and keep it out of landfill. Typically, it's your paper products, plastic bottles, metal, glass cans, and plastic containers. It's that type of things. The organics, and that's been significantly expanded over what it used to be. It's now yard waste, it's food waste, it's soil food paper products. It's a fairly large component of the waste stream. And the leftovers is garbage. That's really the residuals or the discards. One thing to note, it does not include hazardous materials. You cannot throw out hazardous waste. It's illegal. You can't do it. You have other programs that you have to put in place to manage those. And why do you care? Well, you have to comply with a whole lot of state laws.
Yeah.
We'd like to say it's because it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. It is good for the environment. It is good for the community. And at the end of the day, it is the lowest cost option that you can provide to your residents going forward, is the more recyclables and organics they pull out of landfill that will ultimately help control your cost down the road. In the meantime, there's a lot of state laws that you have to comply with. These date back to over 20 years ago, California AB 939, which requires every city and every county in the state to divert from landfill 50% of waste generated, of all the solid waste generated. Half of it has to be kept out of the landfill. Right now, I think this last year, Half Moon Bay was just right at 50%. You didn't have a lot of margin of error. You're just at that compliance, which is good. And when you look at some of these other laws that have occurred in the last 5 years, I think what we're proposing in the programs, hopefully it'll start making sense of why there's got to be some changes. AB 341, put in place a couple years back, requires mandatory recycling for commercial and multifamily accounts. It is tiered at a service level of 4 cubic yards or more has to have the service. It is good to know that of your roughly 135 commercial accounts now, the majority of them have a level of recycling. So you've gotten the majority of your commercial accounts are already in the program of some sort. It's a good thing. AB 1826, which was put in place 2 years ago, it is a similar piece, but it's for commercial and multifamily diversion of organics, food waste, green waste, or combination. The food waste is for commercial businesses, restaurants, stores, that type of thing. You have to have that. The multifamily accounts are not required to have food waste program as yet. They do have to have a green waste program. And when you look at your current account base, in all honesty, you have half a dozen or so that are in that type of program now. It's just starting. So that's one of the areas going forward that's going to have to be significantly beefed up in the new programs. And the law is set up where they've kind of got a tiered approach to it. They've given you a couple of years to get everybody moving forward on it, but it has to be done. Another piece of legislation that we try to capture in the RFP going forward is AB 1594, which again was put in place 2 years ago. It's really, really going to be important for this community because of how you have historically handled your green waste. Green waste it's about a third of what you divert from landfill now. That green waste now is collected, it's separated out, and it is used at the local landfill as alternative daily cover. Great use for it. Well, the legislature said, guess what? In 2020, can't do it anymore. If you want to continue to get credit for complying with the diversion requirements, you have to compost it. It's going to be a big change. But if you don't do that, for example, if you took your green waste that you have now, you took that out of your diversion, you would not be meeting the state requirements. You'd be about 35, 36% as opposed to 50. So it's one of those non-optional programs. We just have to make sure that the programs going forward address that, and it's not allowed. In terms of single-family, residential single-family services, you have your garbage collection. It's weekly. It has to be done weekly collection of garbage for basically for the residential customers and commercial customers. That is a state law. You have to do that. Some communities in the Bay Area have started to experiment with bi-weekly or every other week collection of garbage. That requires a very robust organics programs and recycling programs. We're not suggesting you go there yet. That's something you may look at down the road, but we're suggesting you keep the weekly trash going as it is. One thing we are suggesting, looking at your count base, that you only have about 2% of your single-family customers use the big 96-gallon trash cans. No one's basically using it. We're suggesting you just don't even offer that anymore. It's fundamentally, it's a service that no one's actually using anymore, so just take it away. Everything else on the garbage would be the same. For recycling, we're suggesting you keep it like it is, keep it going with the weekly collection of recyclables. It is a default 64-gallon recycling can. It seems to be working very well. Your residential customers are actually doing a very good job recycling for the town or for the city. They're really the ones pushing your overall compliance. For the organics, it's gone from green waste to organics. We're suggesting on the residential side, the single family, you leave it as it is, just the green waste is the primary program. Ask for a cost option or a price option to add in food waste. And that basically would be allow your residents to put food waste in the green waste can. So it wouldn't necessarily be another collection or another truck, it would just be mixing it together. It is a cost issue because it does require the green waste to go to a different type of compost facility, which is generally a higher cost. What we'd like to try to get back is what is that cost differential? If it's not a large cost differential or no cost differential, you may want to look at it. In terms of diversion, it doesn't really add a whole lot of diversion. It's 2 or 3%, but it does help. We think over the next 10 years, it's very likely that the state's going to change the requirements and you're going to have that program. Just be prepared. The contract documents will be written up to allow that as an option, so you won't have to reopen the contract. You'll just have to pull the trigger and say, get this done, and it'd be a different pricing. Household hazardous waste, right now you have a weekly curbside collection of basically used motor oil, filters, batteries, cell phones, those types of things. Keep it going. It's a great program. When we did the survey, everybody liked that program. We had very high participation. The household hazardous waste, it includes other items though. Pesticides, herbicides, paint, those types of things. Right now, you don't really have a local outlet for it. That it has to go to the county facilities. What we're asking for or suggesting is an option on a pricing option is what would it take to have 2 events per year within the city limits where residents can bring their other additional household hazardous materials and drop it off. What's the cost on that? So I think we can bring that back to you when we bring proposals back and say, is this price something you want to have done or not? In terms of other programs that are not state required, which are great programs, the holiday tree collection you have now, it's a 3-week period. We suggest you continue doing that now. The bulky waste one is also a program that you put in place a couple years back where you went from a community-based bulky waste to an on-call bulky waste. Really high participation, a well received program. Suggest keeping that as it is, just a little clarification of what's the volume you can take, and also to make sure that it's clarified that e-waste materials and mattresses are part of that bulky waste program. Right now, from your last amendment you had with Republic Allied, you have once per year as part of the compost giveaway, people can bring their e-waste and mattresses to that compost pickup site, which is kind of a interesting way of doing it. It's very non-standard, so we're suggesting just roll that into your basic program and the service provided. In terms of multifamily services, again, trash, the garbage, it's weekly collection. It depends upon the number of units and the size and the frequency. It can be in carts. It can be provided in bins. Suggest to keep that the same. Recycling, go to a weekly, more of a required weekly program with some minimum requirements, i.e. 32 gallons, equivalent of 32 gallons of recyclables per unit within the complex. So there's at least a minimum level of recyclables that's provided. Okay, because right now it is a voluntary program. So this would really make it more of a required program like your single-family residents have. They have to participate, they have to do it. So the organics, similar to the recycling, have a minimum level of organics. It is green waste only. If the proposers want to offer up food waste as part of that, let them offer it up, but it's not required. Take a look at it and see if that's something you want to do. It may or may not be a costly program, but if they're doing mixed organics as part of their commercial program, then it might make sense just to pick it all up at the same time so they're not having to run separate trucks, one for the mixed food and one for just the green only. Let's kind of sort that out as the proposals come back and you look at the pricing. And again, on that, it is a tiered program. So the state has set standards and then you need to comply with that, but you need to at least provide the minimum requirements. And I think we've set it up so all of your multifamily customers, complexes would have that subscription level, so they could work with that. Household hazardous waste, right now it's not provided on the bulky waste folks. Because they are still considered residential customers, allow them to participate on the community drop-offs as with that option when the pricing comes back, if that's a program you want to have. I think it'd be well received. Other programs that they have now is the holiday tree collection. It's continued doing that. It's arranged through the property managers. And bulky waste, the way that the bulky waste program currently is for multifamily, most multifamily customers don't even know they have it. It is a service that the management company can arrange for. It is a paid service. It's not really being used because it's an additional cost. We're going to suggest that because multifamily, you do have move in, move out, put it as part of the required service on a basically half a cubic yard per a unit per collection event. And so if you've got 5 units, it's 5 times half a cubic yard. Roll that into the rate base, and so the service will be provided. I think you're going to find a lot of the folks actually going to use it. It does help a lot with the service. It also helps if you have any kind of illegal dumping or any other hot spots. So it sort of takes care of a couple items.
Quick clarification for the yard waste. It's used for erosion control, not ABC.
Well, it's the same. On the commercial, the commercial is a lot of the areas where it has to get really beefed up a lot. On the recycling as well, do you have a level of service that is provided to all your commercial customers? It's a voluntary now. We're suggesting that you have sort of an equivalent of a 96-gallon recycling container as part of the base rate. Anything above that is a charged service. You want to have that significantly rolled out where it's a universal access. The organics for commercial, it's a combination. It can be either green waste, it can be food waste, or it can be a combination thereof, because it's the state says you have to have it. And it is tiered by the volume of organics you have now, and then it's tiered down in the future by the volume of trash, and then the combination. So it gets, over the next 4 years, it's really ratcheted down where the majority of your customers are going to have the service. When we looked at some pricing on it, whether you start that program today or the next day, the sooner you start it, get everybody on that price or on that program, the cost per unit is going to be lower. So if you know you're going to be providing that service to all of your customers, the cost is going to be lower at the beginning as opposed to one customer. It's a very, very pricey program. And that's really what's going on now. I think you have like 3 or 4 customers that have it. It's a expensive program. So we're suggesting that's more of a universal rollout as well. Doesn't mean that every commercial business is going to take the program, but it's going to be out there, and they will be able to, and that gets back to the implementation and the public education and outreach that make it all work together, and that's where it gets to be difficult. In terms of other programs, street sweeping, that's part of your current services now. You've got your residential streets monthly, the downtown area is weekly. We're suggesting you leave that alone. We are asking for a curb mile cost on that, so if you want to have additional sweeping or change the frequency, at least you'll know what the cost base is going forward, so you'll be able to do that. The compost giveaway, right now you have 30 cubic yards per year at 2 different events. We're suggesting you continue doing that, with the exception of taking the e-waste and the mattress drop-off and putting that into the normal bulky waste collection program, on-call program. It's going to be a better program. You do have an allotment of yardage that the town or the city can call up the hauler and say, hey, we've got some illegal dumping hot spots, can you come pick it up? It's not really well defined in the contract going forward. It's going to be defined the turnaround time, the volume and whatnot. It's typically set about 1,000 cubic yards, kind of where it is right now, or very close. We'd suggest keeping it at that same level. If there is additional volume you need, it is a cost that the city would have to pay out. So, but that's a fairly large volume. Hopefully it will not be higher than that, particularly with the bulky waste programs that are being put in place. One of the pieces that's interesting is in your current contract with the Second Amendment to it, there was a lot more on the public education manager and the requirements there. It was a staffing position, but it's a staffing as a company as a whole, not necessarily a dedicated position, so you don't really know what you're getting. But there were requirements of the outreach programs they have to have. We're suggesting that you put the requirements in, but not necessarily the staffing. The hauler has to provide all the public educational efforts to make the diversion programs that they're responsible for putting in place work. They'll work that out. And you may want to go and suggest having funding provided back to the city directly. They can contract out, they can hire staff, but it allows the city a lot more flexibility on how you want to manage that program going forward. Okay. Almost getting to the end. Again, those are not necessarily programs that are required by state law, but if you don't have the public education outreach, the programs, frankly, they just won't work. I mean, it will not work. Large venues, special events, you have that now. Continue doing that, sort of as directed by the city. If more are added, you can add that down the road. Again, the illegal dumping cleanup. I think one of the ones I probably skipped was the public containers. Right now you have a number of containers and locations. Suggest to keep that where it is. It is directed by the city. You say, I want them here, 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 so you have some flexibility to move them where you need them, where you actually need them more. Okay. In terms of the actual RFP document, the majority of it is the service requirements, but there's also, obviously the background information, the current service level information, the current tonnage information, so the proposers know what's going on. The instructions on how to fill out a proposal, because they are fairly complicated. An item is a communication protocol, how to communicate back from the proposer's standpoint to the city staff, so they all know who to talk to, how to talk to them, when they're going to get questions back, and it keeps everybody kind of communicating in the same fashion and keeps everything very, very above board. Everybody gets the same information all the time. The evaluation process, qualifications, the technical proposal, sustainability, and customer rates, that's kind of the standard process you go through. And the criteria, keep in mind that staff doesn't make a decision. We'll bring you the results and present you that, but you get that one. And that's really sort of the overview. If you have any other questions, we're happy to answer it.
Thank you very much. Excellent and thorough overview. Really appreciate it. Are there questions for staff and the consultant?
Yeah, I've got a few questions. In the RFP, I would like to see it stated how many residential and how many commercial customers we currently have. Mm-hmm. And also, if there's a projection that that's going to change.
Okay.
The other issue is when we're talking about food waste, instead of having that as an additional cost on top of the bundled price, could we see a bundled price including food waste so that you can compare those two numbers real easily? Couple more questions. How many customers actually use the bulky waste program right now? I've never used it, and I'm sure my neighbors have used it, but I don't know how many people do use it. So I'd like to know, have some idea of what that is. The other question that I've asked a couple of times over this whole process is, why is it more costly to collect food waste separately from green waste? You're still using a truck, right?
Right.
And right now we have trucks picking up 3 separate containers. Right. What would the additional cost be for picking up a 4th container which just had food waste in it? And how would that compare to adding food waste to green waste, which is going to just increase the cost of the green waste all by itself? Another question. My recycling is, I usually fill up or get 3/4 of the way to filled of my recycling container. But my recycling container doesn't smell bad. So I wouldn't mind having 2 recycling containers and having trucks come by every 2 weeks, if that was a savings. And do other cities do that? Is that in other words, extend the time as opposed to shorten the time? 2 other items. One is, I live in downtown, and I live on Johnston Street, and or Kelly Street, and there are cars parked, mine parked right in front of my house. I never get my street swept. The center of the street gets swept, and that's true for most of downtown because we don't have regulations on, no parking here Monday from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. like they do in the city and other places. So I'm wondering what the cost of that would be. And then one last question is, I perceive a need for more public containers. I like, at McDougal, we now have the recycling ones. I don't quite understand what you recycle and what you don't there, because people come along with coffee cups, and to me that's compost. But a lot of people don't know that, but the plastic top is not compost. The cup itself is. So if there's some way to, maybe we do that in public outreach, is explain to customers what they can do and what they can't do. But I think we need more containers. I don't know if that's just my own personal perception or if it's shared by anybody else. And that's it.
Should I go through and answer them, or do you?
Go for it.
Okay. So let's try to get them here.
Sorry.
We do have in the RFP the number of accounts that the current service provider is collecting from, both residential and commercial. They combine the multifamily and the commercial together, so we don't have a good split out on that. Growth projections, we'll work with staff to see what growth projections we can put in, because clearly a new service provider would like to know if there's going to be new development and so what they can expect. So we'll make sure that gets rolled into the finalized RFP.
Since we treat multifamily dwellings differently from commercial, I think that should be broken out.
In the future it will be, but your current contract did not require that.
And they don't have that information?
We've asked for it, and they haven't been able to provide us that good breakdown on it. So, yeah, the information is what we can get, and they're following the contract requirements, and it's just not there. The food waste is a really interesting one, because I think you're talking about the residential single family. There is no uniform program statewide. Everybody is experimenting, trying to find out the best way to do this. The way that most communities have been doing it so far is, if you have food waste, put it in the green waste. The same container, same truck, same driver, so the daily operating cost doesn't change. The cost is the processing cost. It's a higher cost to process the mixed material than the green waste. That's going to change for your residents regardless, because of the use of green waste now at the landfill. You can't do that into the future. So your green waste processing costs are going to increase regardless if you put food waste in it or not. We've tried to structure the RFP to get that apples to apple comparison. If you add food waste in, what's the cost going to be on a rate base? Is it going to be $1 more or 2% more? We'll have that information for you. Some other communities in the Bay Area are experimenting with a pretty interesting way of dealing with residential food waste, and it's a split container. So the trash container has got a divider in it, trash on one side and food waste on the other. It's really in a pilot stage. I would wait a year or two before you would try to embrace it to see how well it's working. It's typically an expensive item because the containers cost more, the trucks cost more, because the containers are much more complicated, and the truck that picks it up, it's typically a split truck. So the container drops in, it opens up, garbage goes on one side, the food waste goes on the other side. A couple of communities have experimented with just separate collection for food waste. They found it to be very pricey, and the participation was fairly low. So we can ask for that as an option, as a separate collection of food waste. What you get, though, is it is a separate truck, a separate driver, so the operating costs are pretty high. And the real difference between the food waste and the green waste cost, outside of the operating cost, is the processing cost for the organics. For the food waste, it's more expensive to process the food waste than it is the green waste. That's going to change regardless of even if you kept it as a status quo, your processing costs for green waste are going to go up. So what we're trying to do is, what's the incremental cost you're going to have to pay, and we can bring you that information back. Hopefully that'll be sufficient for you to make some decisions on what is the best way to do it. Let's see if I can get some other ones here. I think that was you had, sure.
Is there any state requirement or talk about a state requirement for food waste? collection?
For residential?
residential?
Not yet.
Not at all?
Not yet.
No
It's-
talk about
it's-
it?
It's being talked about, but it is not a requirement as yet. I think in the next 10 years over this term, it's going to be a requirement. So,
I just want to point out that there are going to be check-ins during the course of the 10-year agreement, so that, you know, technology changes or there's other reasons we need to revisit it, there will be periods that we can revisit. So.
the twice per week or the every other week collection of recyclables, some communities have done that. What they've done is they've alternated their green waste and the recycling collection. So one week it's green waste, the next week it's recyclables. That works fine. It doesn't necessarily save a whole lot of money, believe it or not. It's really not a big, you know, it's not a 20% differential. It's, you know, 10% or less differential. It does save a little bit of money, but it's only effective if you can alternate the green waste and the recyclables, because then you can reduce your truck and drivers into 1-to-1. If you don't change the green waste collection, you could keep it weekly, then your recyclables, you can have, it's a small change of dollars, but it's not a huge amount. If you add food waste to the green waste for residential, you have to do it weekly. So, I mean, we could look at that and see if there's a pricing differential. I don't think it's going to be a huge difference.
I'd like to see the pricing differential, and my reason is, you know, the costs are going to go up by, we say, 10% maybe in the next couple of years, and that might offset that increase in cost.
We can add that. That's a pretty easy one to add in. We can add that one in. Okay. The bulky waste, I will probably have to get back to you on that one, because I think we got some information from the Survey Monkey was sent out, and the folks that responded to the Survey Monkey, it was fairly well received and highly used. I don't have that with me, unfortunately, tonight. Yeah, and then the street sweeping, I'm not going to address that one.
City issue, I think.
Yeah, and I'll just say in the staff report, we did say that it is an issue that could be considered by council at a future meeting. That would be something that council would need to direct staff on if that's something that you want us to start looking into ordinances or restrictions in parking.
Well, I have a problem with the non-sweeping of the streets on a weekly basis. I mean, we're paying for a weekly basis cleaning of downtown streets, and it's not happening because the cars are there.
I was just going to say, you might comment on NPDES.
Yeah.
I'll come here. First of all, we can't disagree with you. As we say, we have the best swept center lines of all streets in the world. But I happen to go walking a lot in San Mateo, and I would argue the same point in the neighborhood that I live in there. And it isn't a unique issue. What I can say is that to be effective, you will need to go through a signage, you'll have to go through a formal process, and unfortunately then you face the issue of, one, an expense of signage that have to be placed a certain distance apart to meet vehicle code requirements and the citation authority to do so, and those are and then that sets up another situation, which is visual blight, but with these signs that say no parking on these dates. So it's a huge kind of policy issue. The importance, though, certainly is an issue of, one, just the aesthetic of the community. The other is from an NPDES, the Storm Discharge Issues and Clean Water Act. We have an obligation to make sure that we're addressing those issues. So it is an important issue, and it's something that we can certainly come back with. It's not too hard to actually put a price tag and show you what it looks like in action, and I can say I've done it elsewhere. So that's something we can do pretty easily.
The public containers. Yes, that is one of the areas we're suggesting gets beefed up, that it's better signage, better public education outreach, because you do have organics out there, you do have recyclables, and you have trash. And right now, if you look, it's mostly trash and some recyclables, but you're going to have the organics, compostables as well. So going forward, we hope that that's going to be addressed. I think the way that we've kind of got it structured as as staff identifies areas that are underserved or need more service, they can relocate, reallocate the containers. So I think you'll be going to be covered going forward. I think they just need to know where you want them and what needs to be, where they need to be put more.
Who's next?
Thank you.
I just want to comment that I think the massive amount of input you received from the subcommittee from the City Council to this was excellent, and I don't have any questions.
Did we get
I'm
it in,
with
though?
him.
Harvey and I attended you guys' meetings with other people in the audience that we know are here. There was a good representation of 3 of us there, so it was, we're familiar with all the things.
Other questions? I have one speaker slip. James Benjamin.
Thank you. James Benjamin speaking as an individual, although a member of the Planning Commission. Thank you, City Council members. Just some quick points on this thing. First, the street sweeping issue. Thank you very much for raising the centerline concerns, Councilmember Penrose. I can assure you that this issue is not limited to downtown. You will find in the archives of the Nextdoor website an extensive conversation involving people in Casa del Mar, people in Sea Haven, people and other members of the community. And what we ended up working in our conversations with Republic Services General Manager was that they could give us a day of the week. We tried to get our cars off. They intended that day of the week to be the same day that they were picking up cans. That's problematic because the cans are in the gutter. If we put the cans on the sidewalk, unless that's perceived as an acceptable limitation on ADA, that not having that would be an ADA issue. So finding a well-scheduled day where we could spread it by words of mouth. Maybe we don't need signs in the outer areas. I don't know, because not that many people are parked there. So thank you for the street sweeping. Second, performance standards for the pickup. On windy days, we routinely, after the trucks come, we have to go out and pick up garbage. If you live at the end of a street that blows south, like I do, with a buffer like the Arroyo Willows on the Kehoe Watercourse, it's a weekly occurrence to go out and pick up the trash that's blown down. Some of it would be very embarrassing for my neighbors. Second, SAM is in the current contract. It's not in this contract. I realize there may be some good reasons for that. SAM is their own entity, their joint powers. Why should we be pulling them along in our advantageous coattails? On the other hand, if we get a franchise fee that's based on the amount of revenue we get, maybe it's good. I don't know. But I just wanted to be sure that that was a conscious decision. Fourth, it does seem like we, as a visitor-serving destination, we get a lot of regional waste. And it's a little frustrating as a community to think that part of our job is to achieve goals for diversion of landfill when it's probably visitors that aren't that conscious about how they're throwing out their compost cups or their plastic lids. But even more, what's going into SAM, the amount of weight that goes in that direction. So it'd be nice if we could get some relief for our visitor serving. And then finally, if we could get receptacles that don't drain water off the top into the receptacles. We're creating mosquito habitat in the bottom of our dumpsters during the rainy season because of the way the water drips in. And those were my comments. Thank you for your patience.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Very quick question. So my understanding is that the sewer authority is a customer, but they are included in this? Are they not? Could you clarify that, please?
I'll have to check. Is it a state agency or a? We'll have to find out. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know because if it's they may not be subject to the franchise agreement.
Thank you. Does John? Do you have a comment on that, or can you make something up?
We have designed this as Sam being a customer, like any other customer. We did not include Sam as one of the public uses that were basically covered and subsidized, in essence, by all the ratepayers with that. So they were just a customer in and of themselves. Jimmy's right, and I think it's the right way to go on this from the perspective of the solids, the organic solids that they bring, which are not dried, constitute a significant amount of weight and landfill that we have to contend with, and that's just sort of the issue of being a business or a separate business entity. So our take on the RFP is that they are a customer, not treated as a city facility.
Thank you very much. And my comment to the members of the SAM board is that there are technologies for drying all of that stuff that we should support.
Bring it up. To remind you that you're still an alternate. Any other questions or a motion?
I move to approve the RFP with the clarifications added.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to item 3D, excuse me, no, 3E, which is the city policy discussion for sidewalk liability, repair, and maintenance.
Madam Mayor, I will turn this over quickly to our very capable staff, but just wanted to remind the council that this is one of the other items that is the small S study session items that you've asked for us to bring back to the council. And so similarly, we're looking for some general direction. We will then bring back more detailed information depending on the direction that you give us that we would bring back so that you have good quality information during your retreat so you can prioritize this amongst all of the other wonderful priorities that you will have.
Great. Okay.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. The item before you tonight is a policy discussion on the city's sidewalk program, and tonight we will have to, well, we will try to summarize all we know about sidewalks in one session. I just want to say that tonight's presentation is a group effort, and you will hear from different staff members throughout the evening, and also we have a guest with us today. Todd Master is ABEC attorney, ABEC plan, and he represents many ABEC cities. And Todd and I worked together in 2 different municipalities over the years. So he represents cities on various risk management issues and litigations, including sidewalks. In just a few minutes, Todd will go over different factors, requirements, considerations from legal standpoint, risk management best practices and claims. Then Assistant Engineer Pakiza Chowta will give you a status update on the sidewalk program in Half Moon Bay and on all the great work that was done since the last time this item was on the council agenda in summer of 2015. After that, our Public Works Superintendent, Dan Barris, will give you an update on what work we have in progress currently. And finally, we will talk about the next steps when we will ask for your input on the policy framework itself. And I forgot to click on today's agenda, I apologize. So that's what we are going to talk about today. So what do we know about sidewalks? Half Moon Bay has a mixed and aging sidewalk infrastructure. The downtown area of the city is well served by sidewalks, while some parts of the city may not have pedestrian sidewalks at all. The city does not currently have comprehensive urban tree management policy that would regulate tree selection and maintenance issues related to trees. We also lack in some documented sidewalk inspections and maintenance records on sidewalk repairs. And there are also risk management concerns related to pedestrian safety, accessibility, risk of trip and fall, and related claims against the city, and frankly, lack of compliance with risk management best practices that are imposed on us by a BAC plan. As the city's sidewalk program is fairly new and doesn't quite meet the requirements of what we call the full scope service program. And of course, there are budget and staff constraints as the city sidewalks would require, whatever solution we come up with, it would require allocations of budget and staff resources. And this slide hopefully helps to put in perspective the complexity of the sidewalk maintenance issue in the scope of municipal operations overall. Obviously, lack of sidewalk maintenance can result in creation of hazardous conditions for residents and visitors that can lead to claims against the city for trip and fall injuries or accessibility. Yet, the sidewalk policy doesn't only cover obvious factors, such as legal, pedestrian safety, compliance with ADA, liability and risk management. It also touches on many other aspects of municipal operations, like economic development, tourism factor, overall community image, environmental sustainability, urban tree management, and related policies, and of course, cost of sidewalk repairs and cost of claims associated with this. So when we talk about developing a policy framework, we ask you to factor in all these elements, as they may raise some competing interests. And with this, I would like to turn it to Todd, who will go over sidewalk requirements, best practices, and legal perspective.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. My wife would probably tell you that I don't need a microphone, and that if you put one in front of me, I might not stop, but well, I'll get right to it. Yuli did a wonderful job of kind of explaining what the current law of the land is in the state of California when it comes to sidewalk maintenance and responsibilities. My job tonight is to hopefully succinctly summarize a lot of that was in her staff report and answer any questions you might have. So what I'm going to talk about are two separate things which are related, which is number one, who's responsible for maintaining and repairing public sidewalks, and who is legally responsible when, God forbid, someone is injured based on a condition of a public sidewalk. Those are obviously interrelated, and I'll also talk a little bit about what the city's current ordinance does and what other cities do, and my personal experience, because more often than not, when I'm in the room, it's because, Mike, you've been sued as a result of something that's occurred on a sidewalk. So the state of California, pursuant to the Streets and Highway Code, has specifically stated that it's the adjacent or abutting property owner that is responsible for maintaining a public sidewalk, keeping it in good repair. And that's for public safety reasons, okay? And the city, when an owner fails to comply with that state law, the public entity within which they reside can notify the individual or entity that owns that adjacent property and require them to repair it in some fashion to make it safe for public use. The failure to comply with that notification from the city gives the city several options at its disposal in terms of making the repairs itself, putting a lien on the property. That's state law. That's not Half Moon Bay law. That's within the state of California. Now, what the city of Half Moon Bay has done, along with several other cities within San Mateo County, the city of San Jose and Santa Clara County is another one, is they have basically further codified state law. That's what the city's ordinance says to this day. Individuals have that obligation. And pursuant to Chapter 12.18 of the city's ordinance, the city specifically says that is done to promote the public health, safety, and general welfare. There's good reason for that. Why should property owners be responsible for maintaining public sidewalks, you want to know? As a San Mateo County resident, I want to know the same thing. At the end of the day, it's because as a private property owner who has a sidewalk in front of my house, I'm in the best position to be able to see that sidewalk and the condition of that sidewalk on a day-to-day basis. so that I can contact the city, do what I need to do to comply with state law to make my sidewalks safe. So that is the general law of the land, both in the state and within the city of Half Moon Bay in terms of general maintenance responsibility. Now, what happens when someone's injured on a sidewalk due to what we call in the legal field a dangerous condition, whatever that might be in any particular case? Who is legally responsible for that injury? Well, within the city of Half Moon Bay, they have, the city in 2011, I believe it was, passed its ordinance that talked about that issue. Under California law, the city is responsible for its own property. The city of Half Moon Bay's ordinance doesn't say anything contrary to that. If there's an injury on public property, the public property owner is responsible for that if they're found liable, okay? The city cannot immunize itself from that, okay? It can't do that under California law. It would be unconstitutional to do that. However, the city, like many other cities in San Mateo County, San Carlos is one, Foster City is one, San Mateo is another, pursuant to Chapter 12.18, 150, permits an injured person, goes a little bit further than state law, and permits an injured person to not just come after the city, the owner of the public property, for claimed injuries, but also permits that injured person to also make a claim as against the adjacent property owner, whether it be a private property owner or whoever might own that property, okay? So what does that mean? That means that both the city and the adjacent property owner are jointly responsible, legally responsible for an injury if proven liable in a court of law, okay? The city does not absolve itself from responsibility simply because it adds another element to the private property owner's responsibility in terms of maintenance of the public sidewalk. It's a shared or joint responsibility. And that means an injured individual who decides to make a claim to the city can do it both as against the city and the private property owner. And I will speak from my experience, it has always been the private property owner's insurance carrier who I've had to deal with in those circumstances, because that is a covered loss under homeowners carriers, okay? So that's what would happen. Now, how does that work in reality? This joint responsibility, legal responsibility in Half Moon Bay or Foster City or San Carlos or San Jose, what it means is it reduces the city's ultimate financial exposure, potential loss in a given case. Given the economy over the last 7 or 8 years, and while it's improving, a lot of cities have been my experience, one of the things that they lost were the ability to inspect sidewalks. They lost staff. And so one thing that happened as a result of that is the infrastructure worsened. And as a result, you had more injuries, you had more trips and falls, you had higher claims and more injuries. And I've had cases with injuries resulting in judgments or verdicts or settlements of upwards of $300,000. Given this particular ordinance that we have in place here in Half Moon Bay, for example, let's say for the sake of argument, an individual recovers $100,000 on a condition on a sidewalk, a public sidewalk. In the city of Half Moon Bay, with both the individual property owner responsible and the city responsible, the city at worst would be responsible for 50% of that. So $50,000 savings in that particular instance, which is no small chunk of change in the grand scheme of things, with the property owner, insurance carrier more often than not, fitting the rest of the bill, okay? So that's how it works in reality. Now, why is this ordinance a good thing? It's good from an attorney perspective because I have that additional element within which to negotiate on any particular case, okay? But the reality is it provides an additional incentive to property owners to look at sidewalks and to keep their public right-of-way in front of them safe. They're the ones who are the watchdogs. They're the ones on the ground. City staff isn't necessarily on every piece of sidewalk every given day to judge if there's an issue or not. So it adds an additional incentive to property owners to maintain their sidewalks and report conditions to the city, and that's what the city wants. As I said before, it reduces the city exposure and litigation through cost sharing with property owners. And as such, it preserves the city's budget and staff resources for other needs in these particular instances. And this is important. When I handle a case for a city, regardless of an ABAG planned city, City of Half Moon Bay, you're always looking at every case individually, okay? What are the issues at play? And this particular ordinance in Half Moon Bay gives the city lots of options on how it wants to handle any particular case and how it wants to contribute or not contribute in any particular given case, without having this responsibility, this financial responsibility from the private property owner directly to the pedestrian. It puts the city in a difficult position of deciding whether the city wants to go after an individual property owner, if that makes any sense. And I think also important is that California courts have approved similar ordinances in the Bay Area. This is something that a lot of cities are trying to go to. As I said, there are 4 or 5 off the top of my head I can think of who have this and use it to great effect. And I'll be happy to answer any questions afterward. Oops.
Thank you very much.
Yulia did a nice job here on the slide here of talking about, what does this really mean in the grand scheme of things? And this is ABAG plan for those new to the council. ABAG plan is a joint liability pool within which the city is a party. And these are, Yulia pulled this together, 301 claims over a 5-year period of time for ABAG plan cities, with the cities having paid $2.8 million, the cost being $4 million. So this is a good chunk of change. And even more specific, if you go to the next slide here, is these are just some examples of sidewalk claims over $150,000. I briefly referenced a few moments ago some claims upwards of $250,000. You can see how the city of Burlingame does not have the Half Moon Bay ordinance. So none of them do. So Burlingame is $173,000. That's money paid out of the city of Burlingame. Taxpayers paid that. Cupertino, $500,000. Gilroy, Morgan Hill, Pacifica, et cetera. These are all significant amounts of money that we're dealing with. And having this kind of ordinance is a very important tool that the city can use to negotiate and or evaluate any particular claim. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have just one speaker card. Would you like to hear? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, the group effort continues.
Pass it down the line.
Okay, good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. My name is Pakiza Chatha. I'm the Assistant Engineer in the Community Development Department, and I'm going to be briefly discussing with you about the Sidewalk Repair Program. So the Sidewalk Program is a new program that was initiated as a part of the 2015 and 16 CIP budget. Included within that budget was the Sidewalk Survey Project. To get started with this project in February of 2016, the city hired Precision Concrete Cutting to come and perform an inspection survey of the city and to identify tripping hazards. The objective of the project was to assess safety issues in public sidewalks and to use that data to develop a repair plan. This project fulfilled 3 out of the 4 strategic plan initiatives set forth by the council, as stated, which include infrastructure, environment, health, healthy communities, and public safety. The initial citywide survey, as mentioned, in early 2016, Precision Concrete Cutting came out and conducted a survey of 26 miles of sidewalks and identified potential tripping hazards and locations that needed removal and replacement. What I want to go back to mention is, what is a tripping hazard? A tripping hazard were locations where concrete panels had an uplift of ranging from 1/4 inch to 2 inch. I want to point out here is typical restoration is done for anything above 3/4 inch and above, but the city of Half Moon Bay went as far as low as 1/4 inch to 2 inch. The other thing that was identified in this survey were locations that needed a complete removal and replacement. This is something you'll hear me refer to as a lot as the R&R locations. So these are locations where the concrete panels have had an excessive amount of uplift, either caused by tree roots or utility boxes, or just structural failure of the concrete. The sidewalk repairs. So following the survey in summer of 2016, Precision Concrete Cutting came out and performed and actually did the repairs in compliance with ADA requirements. The method that they use is a proprietary saw cut method, which A, is in compliance with ADA, B, environmentally friendly. There's no usage of water. It's a dry cutting process and has measures implemented for dust control. And C, extremely time efficient. So within 30 days, over 2,500 tripping hazards were mitigated. To simply put that, that's about 10,000 linear feet of sidewalks that were repaired. Also, a part of the results of the repair work, they identified 300 locations that needed complete removal and replacement, R&R. Amongst those 300 locations that were identified, majority of them, 70%, were either due to structural failure of the concrete or tree roots that were causing the uplift. And 30% of them were related to utility boxes. So this screenshot here is a Google Earth file. It's a screenshot of our what we refer to as our searchable database. So all the data that was collected during the repair is extremely valuable to the city. What are we doing to manage it? What we've created is a Google Earth file with all of our locations. I know it's hard to see on the screen, but blue locations denotes the completed work that was done, and the yellow is the locations that need removal and replacement. So each one of these locations are geocoded to an address and have a brief description of the sidewalk condition. I do want to point out this is a Google Earth file, but in the future this can be, and the intent was to have it integrated with GIS in the future. I know everyone's smiling when I say that. So in the future, to have this integrated with GIS would be great because it will make kind of an interactive software and tool for residents to come in and actually see that. But currently, for the time being, we've made, city staff has made instructions on how to access this database available to residents at City Hall. So cost. The total cost to fully remove and replace the 2,500 tripping hazards that were mitigated would have cost the city $770,000. But the actual repair cost the city, done by Precision, cost the city only $85,000. As you can see, that's a savings of over $685,000. And the graph on the screen just shows that in very simplified. On the left, it's what we would have paid if we did the R&R method, but what we actually paid was $85,000. The images on this slide are example cases where a utility box is causing a damage to the sidewalk. As mentioned previously, of the 300 locations that were classified as needing further attention from the city, 30% of them were related to utility-related damages. As a next step, the city is in the process of setting out notices and coordinate with the corresponding agencies that's responsible for the sidewalk damage. The images on this slide are example cases where a removal and replacement is required. A removal and R&R of the concrete is typically required either when a structural failure of the sidewalk has occurred, as seen on the left image, or where a tree root is causing an uplift significantly to the sidewalk panels, as seen on the right image. Of the 300 locations that were identified as R&R, 70% majority of them are related to cases where we will need to go back and complete the R&R work. The city anticipates about $150,000 to hire a contractor and come and replace the structurally failed sidewalks and the panels that are associated with R&R. As a next step, for now, the city can look into either an annual maintenance program or to maintain the ongoing issues, and as well as look into a tree assessment to really further study what the root cause is. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Dan Barros to talk about the tree assessments.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Dan Barros. I am the Superintendent of Public Works Maintenance here for the City of Half Moon Bay. And Half Moon Bay is an exceptionally vibrant, natural urban forest, as you can tell. Trees not only provide an aesthetically appealing feature for the urban landscape, but they provide countless environmental benefits. It's the city's intention to preserve this urban forest, not only for the aesthetic and environmental factors, but also in terms of public safety. Trees within the public right-of-way go hand in hand with and are often a major cause of sidewalk issues. Our next steps within the sidewalk program is to embark on a street tree inventory included as part of this fiscal year's CIP program. That tree inventory is included in this budget process. It's currently in progress, and we hope to have that assessment completed by spring 2017. Much like the work with precision concrete cutting and their sidewalk program, the street tree inventory is intended to do much of the same thing, just with trees in relation to the sidewalk in the urban landscape. The inventory and survey will categorize trees based on species, their risk and hazard mitigation associated with the urban landscape, and also their location within the public right-of-way. With those findings, we will prioritize that data. We will share that with council and formulate a street maintenance program consistent with that's already been done with the sidewalk program in terms of much like what precision concrete cutting has done. Furthermore, the survey data, like you saw with the map that Pakiza showed from Google Earth, they will be able to formulate the same type of GIS formatted data for us, so that way, should the urban landscape be altered in any way in the future, that will be a form of public record as we look up a certain address or facility within the city, so that we can be able to keep those on file. So if there's ever any question about a certain tree, we can go back and visit them in terms of when they were trimmed or removed, etc. And the intention of this is also to mitigate dangerous conditions. And per the current ordinance, it will allow us to continue to inspect, notify, and enforce the ordinance as it relates to public safety and preserving our urban forest in its natural state. Further next steps are the ADA transition plan, and consistent with the regulatory compliance of ADA and how that relates to accessibility for all public facilities. We look to include that into our survey to make sure that not only city facilities, but all facilities within the public right-of-way are accessible for all people with disabilities.
One of the objectives of tonight's session is to get your input on the policy framework itself for the full scope sidewalk program. And the next few slides will just directly relate to the program, what we see, what we understand this program should be. So this slide in front of you right now lists all the objectives that we hoping to accomplish by developing the program. So the first item on the list is obviously mitigation of dangerous sidewalk conditions. Of course, public safety comes first. We also hoping to, well, another objective would be to assist property owners with financial burden of sidewalk repairs. The program would also comply with ADA accessibility requirements, as Dan just talked about that. And the program will meet risk management best practices as defined by ABAG. So these are the typical elements of the full scope program. So it starts with public education, obviously, and we intend to fulfill this requirement or this component through some community outreach, through the website, community news, different ways of public outreach to inform property owners on the duties and share resources with them of what options are available for them. The program should also include multi-year repair plan and budget allocation in the CIP budget related to that. And the program should also have a defined process for annual inspection, notification, warnings to property owners, information or process for public bidding process for repairs, as well as invoicing and enforcement mechanism. And here's where we ask for discussion and consideration of potential program criteria. Since any program would require additional staff and budget allocation, we need your input on these items right here. We recommend that the city program will be citywide and not limited to any particular neighborhood. We also want you to consider the following criteria for prioritizing neighborhoods based on severity of sidewalk conditions, high volume of pedestrian traffic, public accessibility and proximity to public buildings, and by leveraging some existing CIP projects that might be already in place or in work. As sometimes the city can benefit from economy of scale factor by adding relevant sidewalk scope to existing street project. And we also want to evaluate cost-sharing options when we try to determine who pays for what. So in this exercise, we would like to factor, again, high-volume pedestrian traffic areas and accessibility to public buildings like schools, libraries, and etc. We also plan to continue with routine annual sidewalk maintenance work. As Pakiza was explaining, the saw cutting method is very efficient and relatively inexpensive. So this work could be included in the annual CIP program that would be run by the city, or it could be included as a cost-sharing model with property owners. And we would like to look into developing some other incentives for participation when it comes to sidewalk maintenance and replacement. And finally, as previously stated, we need to evaluate the role of street trees and sidewalk conditions. So we can come back to the slide for the purpose of discussion, but I just want to run through the presentation first. So based on the recommendations we received from you tonight, we will develop a sidewalk policy framework and program cost and present it at the Council Priority Study session for your evaluation and inclusion with the overall strategic budget priorities. And that brings us to the last slide of the presentation. Staff recommends that the City Council provide direction to staff to allocate funds in current fiscal year 2016-17 CIP budget in the amount of $150,000 to repair approximately 300 identified sidewalk locations that Pakiza was talking about earlier that may require sidewalk removal and replacement. And the second part of recommendation is to direct staff to return to council with the full scope service program based on agreed upon elements. So that concludes our presentation. We're all happy to answer any questions, and I can go back to the slide with policy options if you would like to.
A question for the city attorney. Do we need to take a motion on continuing the meeting since it's 10:10? Or is it 11? Oh, it's 11. Okay, great. So questions for staff first, or would you like to hear from the sole public commenter first?
How do we do that?
Okay. Mr. Benjamin?
Thank you, members of the council. Couple of quick questions. But seriously, folks, not that quick. Don't forget to tip your mayor. The GPAC and members of the public have had a lot of interest in this item, and questions came up from Planning Director Ikas at one of the meetings where we talked about sidewalks, and since we have our august legal minds here, I wanted to take advantage of it while you were paying for them. The form of ownership of the sidewalk seems to vary from subdivision to subdivision. Sometimes the sidewalk is on land that was granted to the city under the subdivision agreement. Sometimes it seems to be on land that is part of a private property, but an easement for the improvements were granted in favor of the city. And I wonder if that's a powerful distinction with respect to the city's responsibility or whether it is not. Second, I appreciate the GIS presentation that we saw. I'd like to try to carry that a step further, especially before we invest a lot of money in the inspection aspect of this. It's not that inspection isn't important, but I think it can be done more efficiently. And to sort of illustrate how that could be done, I want to call your attention to the publish-subscribe model, as demonstrated by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Members of the public can send them a copy of an observation of an endangered or threatened species, and biologists who need to know about that can go look at them. And nobody from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife needs to come to that spot and inspect. I'm thinking that a model like that might be more cost-effective than sending around inspectors looking over all the miles of sidewalk that we have. Third, I wondered about, and I appreciate the question that was asked about what do we do with people who can't afford the maintenance concern. This is obviously an issue. And when the repairs take place, it seems like there would be scale economies of having all the equipment located in the same neighborhood at the same time, rather than expecting the homeowner to, bring out the equipment and have all those transportation costs that are fixed and have this very small variable cost that's associated with repairing that particular part of the sidewalk as opposed to an entire neighborhood sidewalk at one time. There were other details, but that's enough, and it is late. So thank you for your forbearance.
Thank you, Jimmy. I'll bring it back to the council. Questions and comments?
Through the mayor. My understanding, I may be wrong, is that the 2011 ordinance was primarily a change in liability and not maintenance requirement. So my question is it possible for the city to now assume complete liability for any sidewalk accidents?
You are correct to the extent that the ordinance in 2011 changed the dynamics of legal responsibility so that individual property owners would actually owe a duty of care in the legal terms to people using the sidewalks in front of their property. So, and that, based on the language of the law within the city of Half Moon Bay, it's a joint responsibility. But your question is, can the city assume all of it? And what I would say to that, generally speaking, is that in other cities with similar ordinances, we have looked at that on a case-by-case basis to see what the condition is that's at issue. For example, does it pertain to a street tree versus something associated with the private property, let's say a car parked on a sidewalk, so that you can look at it on a case-by-case basis rather than just a general formula of, yes, it's always going to be the private property owner. That's been my perspective over the 16 plus years I've been representing public entities in sidewalks.
I'm confused. I thought you just said that it might be always the private property owner. I'm talking about the converse. I'm talking about letting the city always be liable. The maintenance is one issue. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about liability.
And forgive me, for point of clarification, as I said, it would be a case-by-case basis. For example, hypothetically speaking, if I were to come to you in a particular case where there is a condition, where there is a lawsuit or a claim, and it is caused by some city property, let's say a city tree or something like that, then the city has the options. What this ordinance does, it doesn't necessarily require the private property owner at all times to pay it. The city can decide what it wants to do. Now, what the ordinance does, however, provide is that the individuals who are injured can pursue both the city and the private property owner. When it comes to negotiating who pays what, that's when the dynamics of the particular case and the facts can be discussed. And if the city believes that it's its responsibility, it can make that determination. If it doesn't, it has the potential to cost share.
Forgive me for beating this dead horse, but is it possible for the city to pass a new ordinance that says that the city is 100% liable for any sidewalk issues because sidewalks are a public requirement or health necessity. Is that allowed?
Well, I'm not the attorney for the city, so I'd leave that to your city attorney to make those kinds of questions. But I would say that the state law is a maintenance responsibility, and I will say in the cities that don't have the Half Moon Bay ordinance or the San Jose ordinance, that cities have in fact gone after the private property owner where they believe the private property owner was somehow caused the condition to seek what we call indemnification from them pursuant to the California state law or the local equivalent of it, if that makes sense.
Reed, what say you?
First thing I say is Todd's a liar because he was very quick to turn that microphone off. Secondly, the question as asked by Councilmember Arbach is, can a city legally put an ordinance together that says responsibility for injuries that may occur is solely with the city? I don't see any prohibition on making that a law. It'd be an odd law to write because you don't generally write a law just saying, we accept all liability. I've never seen a law, quite frankly, like that. But I don't see any prohibition in the Streets and Highways Code. What you may run into is the statutes in conflict. The Streets and Highways Code said that a private property owner or the owner of a lot fronting it has an obligation to do something. The city could write an ordinance that says, notwithstanding state law, the city will accept and is now responsible for all maintenance and injury and liabilities that would occur. Does that mean a plaintiff has to forego suing the private property owner under state law? No, you can't foreclose that opportunity for that private property owner to avail themselves of state law. If we were a charter city, we may have a different scenario, but we're not. We're stuck with the general law, and that means that state code would prevail over us if there was a conflict. And this wouldn't be a direct conflict, but if I was a plaintiff's attorney, I would say to the city, nice ordinance, but I'm going to sue everybody I can because that's the best position for my client, is to have all of the people with money at the table for a resolution. Mm-hmm.
And it has been my experience that more often than not, the city and the adjoining property owner are brought in anyway by the injured party. And from time to time, the property owner will say, wait a minute, I'm not obligated to you pursuant to state law, but given facts of cases, I'll say it this way, that I would say about 75 to 80% of the cases I have with cities that don't have an ordinance like this city does, the plaintiff still brings the private property owner into play and the private property owner still contributes.
What about a law that said all private property owners are required by law to maintain their sidewalks in an ADA compliant, safe way? And if they do so, if they do maintain that sidewalk, then they are not liable.
I can't speak to the ADA, but I will say that the California Streets and Highway Code basically says that which is that you have to keep your sidewalk in a way that makes it safe for people to use it. And I will say that if you comply with that, then you're not going to be responsible for a condition on your sidewalk, because it really runs part and parcel of to Yulia and the rest of the staff's points in terms of maintenance. If you maintain these sidewalks, if you do the 2,500 grinds or saw cuts, and you put money into a budget to fix the 300 places that needed to be removed and replaced, and you put that in and that's repaired, you're going to not only reduce the exposure of the city, but to your point and your concerns, you're going to reduce the exposure of the abutting property owner, because that will be the saving grace there.
And Deborah, just to clarify, putting an ordinance together that said something along those lines would basically be trying to prejudge a case before it went to trial. What you'd be saying is, if I did indeed not have a dangerous condition, then I'm not liable. Well, that's for the jury to decide. And you couldn't put a law together, because the defense would be, you've brought a claim for me because you allege my sidewalk was dangerous. Well, I disagree. I maintained it in compliance. And then the jury decides, indeed, as a matter of fact, is that sidewalk clean or not? And therefore, are you liable or not?
So, a couple comments. It's our responsibility to mitigate risk to the city and financial exposure. That's one of our obligations. We also have an obligation to our community to maintain those things that are within our span of control. I think the state law provides the right mix of incentives, which is you as a property owner are required to observe and maintain your sidewalks, and thus if you do, you are not exposed. That's your incentive to mitigate your risk, thus mitigating the city's risk of financial exposure from a legal complaint or some injury. So that all works. I don't know why you would ever want to give away your protections. The protections are there for a reason. You can always, on a case-by-case basis, say, oh, that was our truck. That's our obligation. Then you can make that determination. But to categorically not mitigate your risk is just I think, it's a foolish move. But what we've done so far is, maintaining the sidewalks and the saw cut stuff is smart. Replacing the 300 is smart. Having a program so that the community has access to for some subsidized or cost sharing for those repairs is smart. Then we are sharing that burden, and then thus further mitigating our risk, which is our responsibility. So I think the policies and ordinances are appropriate. I think we don't have the right program in place, and we need to put the right program in place.
Councilmember Eisen.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I think and I have to figure out if I'm wrong on this, but currently the onus to make repairs to the sidewalk is on the homeowners. Yet we are going out and doing the exact opposite of what we're saying we're doing. We're like, we're going to go out, here's $150,000 to go continue to do what we are telling you to be responsible for. It seems like an opposite approach to what our law currently says. So that part, although I agree should be done, and I'm happy we are doing it, seems incongruent with the current law that we have set up. So I'm curious to know your perspective on that. And then in terms of, I don't believe that we should be directing staff to do a full sidewalk inspection and maintenance system and the whole thing. I think we need to have liability on the homeowner, at least 20%, 30%. They need to have an invested interest to maintain their sidewalks, so we aren't reliant on the city to go around and find all that stuff all the time, which would be impossible for city staff to be able to do. And then we can cover, let's say, 80% of it. And that way there is incentive for people to report out the problems they have with their sidewalks. I also very much like the ability of going into each neighborhood at specific times, maybe one a year, one every 6 months, whatever it is, to maximize the ability to use different cost, basically to save on cost. You've got one agency coming in doing all the repairs at one time. That makes perfect sense to me. So that's kind of my basic quick rundown of it.
And Adam, I'm happy to answer the first question for you, which was, it seems incongruent for the city to have an ordinance placing maintenance and liability responsibilities on private property owners while simultaneously going out and doing maintenance work. And there's a reason for that, and it may be a bit of a legal nuance, but I'll give it to you as best I can. You may be familiar with the idea of suing someone for negligence. And what this statute in the Streets and Highways Code and in the Half Moon Bay Municipal Code establishes is a duty of care owed by the property owner. The property owner has a duty of care to exercise reasonable behavior and to mitigate. If they have a duty to make sure the sidewalk is safe. If they breach their duty, they could be sued under a cause of action for negligence. The city is not an agency you can sue for negligence with respect to property damages, but there is a separate statutorily created cause of action against cities for what is called dangerous condition of public property. So you can sue a homeowner for breaching their duty of responsibility in terms of negligence, and then you can simultaneously sue the city for a dangerous condition of public property. And because the city had gone out and done a streets assessment and identified 300 really significant issues, we were then on notice, which is my number one defense to any dangerous condition claim. We didn't know about it, therefore we have no responsibility to fix it. Now that we know about those 300 hotspots, we have an obligation to put together a response plan to do something about it to protect the city against an independent cause of action for a dangerous condition of public property. And I forget who on the staff mentioned it, but they talked about the 1/4 inch to the 2 inch. The legal standard of what is a dangerous condition is different than that. We took a broader range. I don't know if it's 1 1/4 inch. 3/4 an inch is now the standard for what is a dangerous condition. So if you have a 1/2 inch lift, no obligation to do anything. City was proactive, went from a 1/4 inch, on the low side. Of course, anything up near 2 inches, we're obviously going to have to do something to. And I think after 3 inches, maybe you're looking at a true R&R. But ultimately, that's the rationale behind it. The city still has to protect itself against those really dangerous conditions while still, trying to incentivize the day-to-day ownership or owner of the property to have some responsibility and skin in the game, as you sort of mentioned.
So we're basically, from that perspective, on the hook to regardless take care of the other property that we've identified at this point.
Once we're on notice, if something were to happen and someone were to be injured, there would not be a defense for the city.
A couple of questions that you may not be able to answer, but did this sidewalk survey look at places that needed sidewalks, or was it simply sidewalks that needed repair? Okay, not areas that were without sidewalks. Okay. And then that's good. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. It's funny that you mentioned that, because one of the things I had talked about earlier as well was identifying the streets that don't have sidewalks. And then I know we get into this whole nother talk about, there's some of those houses are actually supposed to help pay for a sidewalk if we deem that one, and trying to map that out is necessary, because there are a couple places where I think that is necessary. We'll get to that part of the conversation later, but I agree with you.
Other questions or comments? So I'd like to ask each of you, where do you stand on the liability issue, separate from repair? I think that's one of the reasons we're having this workshop, is to have a discussion about liability as well as repair and maintenance and the expenditure of funds to do repair and maintenance.
So I think they're interrelated. I think our efforts to do repair and maintenance are our efforts to mitigate our liability and to prevent injury, but also there's a financial incentive for everybody to mitigate our liability. And so I think the current structure is appropriate. I think it has the incentive for the homeowner and the incentive for the city. And right now I see the city doing its part. I think we probably could do something more on communication by making it as part of something that we do going forward, and perhaps do something like make some cost sharing available for those types of situations. I think that's all about dealing with liability. I don't think it's appropriate for us to to give away our legal protections. I think that's why we have them.
Yeah, I would agree with that, pending the cost share and how that works out. There are some people in our town that can't afford to pay anything for sidewalk repair. And if the city is willing to look at that and comes up with a program where, depending on income, cost share is allocated, then I'd be fine with it, as long as the parameters were reasonable.
We're talking liability now.
So I have a related question to that. I know the only reason why I jumped in, I know Harvey's ready to talk, but so related to that, what does the county do if you don't pay your property tax? Right, so they put a lien, right? And so I think as a policy, we need to be careful that every time somebody can't afford something, that the city comes to the rescue. I think we need to be aware that the cost of owning a home is the cost of owning the home, and the property, cost of owning the property is the cost of owning the property, and maintaining that property is part of that cost. So I'll just share that because I thought it was related.
Yeah, I don't mind helping out people that don't have any money in our city. I think that's an incredibly important thing that we do. And the fact that the city has proposed that they put $150,000 into the sidewalk repair is great. And then I'm not sure where the cost share comes in. Is the city going to, if somebody charges $300,000 to do complete repair of all the sidewalks, then that $150,000 that isn't allocated, does that come out of the property owner's pocket? And how do you determine how much they're going to pay?
So there's a variety of ways to do that, and I'll have our folks provide, the experts here provide some more detail. But that's the idea. That's what we were trying to get from the council today. What kinds of areas are you interested in doing cost share? Under what kinds of circumstances? So we have some of the things listed on the slide here. Would you like us to take a look at the high traffic areas? Would you like us to take a look and perhaps treat differently the areas that are accessing public facilities? So these are the kinds of things that we'd like to get your input on, and we could potentially bring back from you. It sounds like you're interested in a cost-sharing program where the city can pay some of those costs. We're happy to bring that back. We're just trying to understand what criteria, under what circumstances would you like for us to do that, if at all. I'm hearing you do want that, but under which of these circumstances would you like to do that? And we'll bring more of that information back of what that might look like, and maybe bring back a couple of options so then council can decide how they'd like to see that, and bring some dollars attached to what that might cost.
The reason I mention it is because of the liability issue. I'm perfectly happy with having a shared liability as long as it is made easy or possible, or whatever you want to say, for property owners to fix the sidewalks.
And if I may, we're trying to make that easy by the improvements we've already made. So we've taken care of a majority of the issues already. Very quickly. We're proposing to take care of another 300 very quickly. We're proposing, and I don't have the numbers for me, the utility boxes, we'll have those taken care of by the utility. So most of the sidewalks are going to be in very good shape. But we still have some of the bigger issues of repair that needs to happen with the trees and the roots. But the idea is that we'll have the property owners, the adjacent properties, call the city, work with the city, and figure out what we can do. And again, as Todd mentioned, it's a case-by-case basis, so we can bring that forward. And if we're causing the damage, if it's a city tree, and I'm afraid to use the word city tree, but we'll bring that back. If it's something that the city is causing, then we'll probably say, we don't recommend that the property owner pay any of this. We think it's a city responsibility. But we retain the option to treat each case differently.
I keep coming back to the question of liability. There was a homeowner who had something like a half-inch change in elevation. She was sued for over $100,000 because she was. Okay, she broke her. The person broke her elbow, and almost lost her house based on that. And that's an enormous cost compared to fixing a sidewalk. I'm not talking about maintenance. I agree that the state law and common sense say that the city should help if it can do it in a cost-effective way. And I certainly approve of the expenditure of the funds that are being asked for. But I'm talking about something completely separate, and nobody seems to listen. I think the city should assume liability for injuries on sidewalks. And you may not agree with me, but at least listen to what I'm proposing.
I will say also that I'm concerned about, asymmetries between the city, which has a city attorney and lawyers and, insurance, and a property owner that may have bought the house under one economic condition. People lose their jobs or get, lesser paying jobs or just find themselves in a position because of medical bills that maybe they can't handle something right then and there. You have somebody who's, potentially gaming them, people who trip and fall on sidewalks and then sue people, to make money. The individual property owners just are not in the same realm as the city in terms of being able to, address, litigation. It just seems to me there's asymmetries there in a law that says, you will repair and keep in good condition sidewalks in favor of both the city and the property owner, because they're not quite, symmetrical in their abilities to deal with these sorts of situations. And in this situation that Harvey referred to, the city just told the person who fell, just go sue the property owner. We don't want anything to do with it, right? So,
That might be a bit of an overstatement.
well, in any case, I would like us to have protections that we can't do that we can't, explicit that we can't, shove all liability onto the homeowner. I mean, I want to prevent that from happening in the future. Yeah.
So to your point, that's not what the city ordinance does. The city ordinance does not shove all the responsibility onto the property
That's how it
owner.
was interpreted, though, in this particular case.
But that would be illegal, unconstitutional. That's
Yeah.
not the law. And the courts have said that. Cities cannot divest themselves of, to Reed's point, a dangerous condition. You cannot immunize yourself as to a condition of public property. And that's why there's the difference between dangerous condition and negligence. The city has its responsibility to maintain its property, and that's why an injured person can go after both simultaneously. And the city cannot immunize itself and say, property owner, it's all on you.
But it seems to me the property owner becomes the low-hanging fruit in that situation. Somebody's not going to sue a city, that has a lot of money and resources. It's easier for them to just sue the property owner because they might be more vulnerable. I'm just guessing, but.
If I can respond to that, it's the exact opposite. Cities are sued all the time because they are the deep pockets, they are the low-hanging fruit. It's the private property owner who more often than not is not brought in because they, to your point, might not be in the economic position to pay a high damage award. That's been my experience over the years.
I certainly support the recommendations and approve of all the work that's been done so far. I think it's, good risk management for the city, but it's also good risk management for the property owners. And the one thing I'm concerned about is, I do, and I think the council, all council members want a more walkable city, a safer city for pedestrians and cyclists. And we would like more, sidewalks or trails, through neighborhoods where we don't have them now. And I'm just wondering how we incentivize people, accepting some financial responsibility for putting in new sidewalks, if we make the context, too onerous or threatening and risky. I'm just thinking out loud, but I do support the recommendations.
One of the things I would just float out there is, since you mentioned, continuing is the reason that we have the standard for the city for a dangerous condition of public property, which is different from the homeowners, is you make it more difficult to sue cities. And you require them to have notice. And why do you do that? Because if you held the city strictly liable under a negligence standard for every trail, for every sidewalk, cities wouldn't build them. They would simply say, it's too much liability to accept that I have to go out and look at every square inch of sidewalk, every trailhead. I can't do that and meaningfully discharge the remaining duties the city has to its citizens and its elected officials. So there is good policy in restricting that. And if you were to take a policy position, which is more like what it sounds like, I hear Councilmember Rohrbeck saying, let's establish an ordinance assuming all liability. And to Mr. Masters' point, that is something that the city can do on a case-by-case basis, but to declare a policy right now, every instance where anybody falls on the sidewalk will pay for it. Well, what if a truck crashed overnight, caused a crack in the sidewalk, and the person tripped and fell? Should the city pay for that, or should the drunk driver pay for that? And so having a bold policy that says one way or another is why I think you're hearing a little bit of hesitation. Granted, I'm advising the city council. He's advising you from ABAG's perspective. So different reasons for it. But if the council, I know this council has a desire to expand trails, open space, to keep that in mind as a policy implication that could have repercussions down the line.
No, I think staff has done, excellent work on this, and I'm ready to, accept a motion and second to, per staff. So I do think we want to look closely at the bike and pedestrian master plan and see how it intersects. I will say to Adam that, the city is responsible for Americans with Disability Act compliance, and this full scope inspection and maintenance program is part of our due diligence and part of that ADA transition program that they're talking about. We really have to have a handle on our accessibility per federal as well as state standards. So that's why I also think this is a good idea.
So from our discussion earlier, my understanding is that once we identify problems, we are then responsible for the problems moving forward. So anytime that we are going out and doing a full scope inspection and identifying everything that exists, the potential costs from that inspection could be extremely high because we have to then deal with all those problems, correct?
If I may, so then we can, in that case, say, oh, it's city property, we'll take care of it, or we can inform the homeowner of something we've observed on their property and say, and you can use program A or B or C to address that. A, you do it yourself. B, you share it with us. C, I don't know, something else.
And sorry.
Go ahead. No.
What I would say is that in cases where we have a clear 3/4 inch raise where we know that we have satisfied the legal standard for a dangerous condition of public property, I imagine the city's policy should be, from a fiduciary perspective, fix it now. When you have a 1/4 inch rise, that might be an appropriate time to send a letter to the homeowner offering maybe a cost split to level out that small discrepancy.
The other thing I've noticed doing research is that, a lot of cities in California have done, just what we're doing. They're going out and they're making all the repairs and getting everything square and then going to the property owners and saying, okay, we're in good shape. Here are your responsibilities. Here's how we're going to help you meet your responsibilities, et cetera. So it's not an uncommon practice.
Through the mayor, if I can offer, you said evaluate cost share options, and you're probably looking for some direction on those. I actually don't see those as options. I see those as elements I want to see included. Include high volume areas, emphasize public buildings, include annual maintenance, incentives for participation, roll of trees. I didn't see those as one over the other. I see that as some aspect of all of those need to be included. And if I can make a motion, if that's okay.
Can I just make one clarification?
All right, I got 15 minutes.
think it would be good too, since we're a beach community, to maybe just call out, coastal access routes or something, where there's a lot of tourist traffic in addition to just local and neighborhood traffic. So.
No, and with that, I move to approve the, so I guess I move the staff recommendation. Do I need to read the whole thing? I guess I'm thinking to myself. Okay.
It's getting late.
Yeah, it is late. I move the staff recommendation.
I'll second it.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Rohrbeck,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Penrose,
Yes.
Mayor Reddick,
Yes.
Councilmember Eisen,
Yes.
Councilmember Kowalczyk,
Yes.
motion carries.
That we are at the end of a very long road. We've been here since 4:30. Motion to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is over. Thank you, everyone.